No, no, no. Why are you clapping? If you clap, I'll speak in Korean. English is okay, right? Yes, I think that's the predominant language here, so I'm going to try to speak in English. A couple of days ago in Hundeok, Father, I think there was a small group, small delegation from this crowd in Hundeok, and Father called me in, and he said, "Hyung Jin, talk about MMA." I think some of you were there, right? Some of you were there. And I'm sure now most of you probably know what MMA is. MMA is mixed martial arts. And really it's the most difficult type of sport and martial art. It combines the most rigorous types of training. So there's 4 major arts, and on top of that you can incorporate any other art. But the 4 major arts are, boxing and Thai boxing, which is like kickboxing, and then wrestling, which is like Greco-Roman wrestling. And there's grappling like jiu-jitsu, so there's ground fighting as well. So why is Father making me talk about MMA all over the place? That's an interesting question. If you've seen MMA on TV, which most of you probably have, you know it's not ballet or something like that. You know this is probably the most dangerous sport. And it's a combat sport. It is the most dangerous combat sport in the world. As you know, and I explained to the crowd there, that in my life, actually, martial arts was very important. It saved me, I think, many times. When I was young, martial arts provided me some place where I could become like crazy about, When I was like in middle school, high school, then you have all this different energy because you're changing and you're growing, etc. And that's where we know, of course, that's the age where Adam and Eve fell. So that there's a big temptation for dating, and in America there's a drug culture and there's a party culture, and of course, free sex culture, especially in the high schools in America. And so that's very different than some places, like I've lived in Asia too, and obviously those things exist, but not at the same scale, not at the same level of openness. So obviously for any person who's grown up in that environment, for example in America, I believe in Europe it's the same, then you have to, as a young person in your early teens, you have to deal with these issues. Huge peer pressure, huge. Any young person here who grew up in those areas, humongous, huge peer pressure to smoke and drink and do drugs and have sex. Premarital sex, date, etc. And so for me, that obviously everybody has to go through that challenge, but for me, I became crazy about martial arts when I was right about in high school. And I loved it. I mean, I don't think about anything else. From day to night, I'm thinking about martial arts. And I remember I used to have, I loved Bruce Lee. And I had all these posters of Bruce Lee in my room. And I remember True Mother came in my room one day and she said, "Yeah, Moya, you have more pictures of Bruce Lee than true parents." That was quite a good comment, actually. That was quite a good observation I wasn't aware of at the time. But yeah, so anyways, I loved, martial arts. And I think partly it was also because I'm Asian person, and growing up in the West in the 80s and 90s, you don't have a lot of Asian heroes on the screen, big screen, or in the movies or on TV. It's not like now you have all these Asian people on TV and on the screen. But not back then, not 20 years ago. So in my heart, I found some kind of solace as myself as an Asian person in America, and also, we were bullied because we were Moonies, and everybody knew we were True Father's children. So all the way from Hyung down, all the way, we were, most of us encountered bullying. For me, I remember in 8th grade is where I got into my first fight. No, not 8th grade, I'm sorry. That was, it was in 7th grade. I probably fought kids when I was younger, like in elementary school, but I can't remember. But I remember this one instance when I was in 7th grade. And I kind of deserved it because I took somebody else's homework. And, I was running around with his homework. And so he was saying, "Give me back my homework." And I remember he grabbed me, and we got into this thing, and the teacher had to come in and say, "You boys, stop it," and we got detention and all that. So I remember, I actually with that kid, I actually became best friends with him in high school. That was interesting. But I do remember being bullied in middle school by kids. And it was very interesting. As soon as I got into high school, and of course now everybody, and I know, and now I'm studying martial arts. And I'm showing to kids, I was showing to my friends this or that. And so quickly it gets around school that I'm quite crazy about martial arts. Then something immediately happened. I had no more bullies. No more bullies picked on me. So this was actually a very important thing for me to experience. Because number one, I experienced bullies. There's always bullies. And there's bullies in every elementary school. My kids encountered bullies, bad ones, when they came to Korea because they're predominantly English speaking. They encountered some really mean ones. And if you raise your kids in Korea, there's the wangta muna, there's bullying, a lot of bullying. In America too, everywhere you go, you will find every elementary school, middle school, high school, you will find bullies. You will find kids that feel that it is in their right to, maybe they're bigger, right? To use their strength or to use their power to put fear and scare other kids. So this is a reality that I definitely encountered. I'm sure most of you have probably encountered this in your life. I'm sure. So I think it's something that's universal. We've all experienced this. I went through high school, of course. Then I got blessed. I was blessed when I was right before I graduated senior year. So right after I finished high school, and I was still practicing martial arts very diligently. I was going to multiple dojos, studying different martial arts like JKD, boxing, Thai boxing, and jiu-jitsu at the time. And I was still training, and then I have all this, I could focus all my energy there. And then, of course, then Father gave me the great blessing of being blessed, becoming blessed. And so, as you know, that's very life-changing. And for me, now I could, just like I use the energy to be crazy about martial arts, now I could be crazy about my wife. You see, that energy. But I stopped martial arts training. It was after I got married, blessed, then I basically stopped training. And then for about maybe, let's say, 10 years, all my 20s, the period where, I lost Hyung Jin, and through that period where, I studied with other religions and, went to divinity school, got my theological studies, etc. And then into my late 20s where then I even did ministry, and early 30s. And so for like 15 years, let's say 15, almost, some odd years, I'm not practicing strenuously martial arts. And actually, but of course, during my 20s, I'm still keeping up with it, and I'm seeing the growth of martial arts around the world, especially with MMA, etc. And I still love it, but I kind of was not able to do all the practice and training. And then about a year and a half ago, then Father took me out of ministry, and he put me in a position where I have to follow him around and get the direct training, which is, of course, for me, the most valuable thing. But then something else happens. While I was with Father, I remember one time we were in Kamundo, which is a small island here. Father frequently visits. And we're in Kamundo, and he was in the the Hundoke area. And somehow, I don't know how, anyways, he was watching some kind of martial arts thing. I don't know if it was MMA. But anyways, we got talking about martial arts. And then, because they have internet there, I said, Father, this is what mixed martial arts is. And I showed him, and then, showed him some of the very famous fighters, huge. In Japan, you all know, Sakuraba and these kind of guys, and in America, the top level fighters in the UFC. And so Father watched one UFC we watched it together. And at first, if you don't know martial arts, you don't know what's happening. So it just looks like two people are trying to kill each other, which is somewhat true, but it's more samurai than that. It's not exactly true. It's not only you're trying to kill the other person. Okay, it's actually, it's a serious competition. And it's actually a serious science and a serious art. The end goal is not necessarily, at least, for myself, training this kind of martial art, is not just for the competition, etc. It's actually something much more profound. It really is a spiritual training, I feel. And so anyways, I was watching this and with Father, and because Father, it's his first time seeing this, of course it's hard for anybody to understand exactly what's going on. What is this person doing? What is that person doing? Why is he going in, taking him down, and then doing Why is he in this position rather than this position? What's he trying to do when he's moving towards that arm? Or what's he trying to do when he's moving towards that leg? Or what's he doing when he's trying? You see, it's hard to understand what's going on. So then I was explaining, just play by play. I was just watching the two fighters and then explaining, he's circling that way because he wants to avoid the leg kick here. Or he's circling in because he's setting up that right hand. Or he's circling this way because he's preparing for a takedown. And then, or went on the ground, he's going this way because he's trying to take his back, the guy's back, and try to go for a choke. Or he's going this way because he's attacking an arm bar, right? So I'm explaining these things to Father. And then we had a couple security guys, so I said, come here guys, and I called them and I showed Father what these are. So like when they did a particular choke, then I showed him, this is how you do this. And when they did a leg choke, then I showed, this is how you do the leg choke. So I showed them basically, did a small, just while I was explaining. Now this was very private. What my motive, of course, was to allow Father to just understand what's happening, and for him to then, of course, then if you understand what's happening, then you can enjoy it more. And Father just loved it. He loved it. And so from that day on, everywhere I go, he's been saying, Hyung Jin, get over here and do a demonstration. You see, that's how it all happened. And then I'm trying to beg him, say, Father, I don't want to do all these demonstrations, please. Right? So I had this couple months where Father's saying, everywhere I went, I mean literally everywhere I went, I could be in front of like 5 people in the living room with Father and some leaders, and he would say, do it on the leaders. Right? We could be in, for example, in Las Vegas, where we did a big event, and then Father said, you have to do a demonstration, 3,000, So everywhere I went, then Father's making me do these things. And I don't like doing that. Honestly speaking, it's not my favorite thing to do. And so I went through this maybe 1-2 months where Father was, making me do this almost every day. And 1-2 months, I was begging Father every day, Father, please stop making me do this every day. It's driving me crazy. Right, of course. But Father, silence, boy. You better do it. Father, he's a samurai. So anyways, so at some point I realized many things, actually through this experience, many things. Number one, a very simple and obvious one, is that Father loves martial arts. He loves it. I mean, he's always been interested in it. He loves it. And the reason why he loves mixed martial arts, or the UFC and these kind of fighting, is because it's so scientific. In order to get to a high level of MMA, you have to train in multiple disciplines. You can't just be an expert in one thing. You have to literally be expert in 4 to 5 different sports. And then the training is terrible. It's torture. Training is torture. Right now I'm training with certain UFC fighters, and the training is torture. It's torture. I feel like I want to die every day. I'm in pain every single day, injured or in pain. I call one of my coaches, he's a UFC fighter, I call him the torturer. He just beats on you. And so of course I realized Father loves martial arts. Second thing, of course, I realized is that I had many issues even with my own self that I wasn't aware of through this experience. One of the things that when I was going through that 1 or 2 months where Father was forcing me to do like demonstrations every day in front of whoever, and sometimes he would be like, pick out somebody from the crowd and, and choke them out. I'd be, oh, Father, I don't want to do that. I do that when we're training. I don't want to just pick somebody out and choke them. Right? And Father would do this. Pick somebody out and make them unconscious. So I said, Father, no, Father, I'm not going to do that. And so anyways, during that 1 or 2 months where I was really, I guess I was in some sense rebelling against this. I didn't want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. No, this is very uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. Like this kind of thing. I also realized about myself is that in some way, I was a little ashamed of the fact that I like this type of martial art. Do you see what I mean? In some way, I was a little ashamed that maybe, it's so violent and it's such a hard sport. But everybody knows me, softer. I don't treat people bad, and I don't try to scare people. But yes, I like this kind of hard training, but I don't like to bully people or stuff like that. So I felt as maybe, that it would be, hard to understand. Be very hard to understand. I thought Hyung Jin just likes flowers and flower arrangement and like meditation. I love flowers, and I did practice flower arrangement and tea ceremony and meditation, all that. I love those arts. Those are real arts, and they are real samurai arts as well. Ikebana or chanoyu. These are real samurai arts as well. So I do love those arts. But I also love this kind of very hard fighting training. So I realized even in myself, this is a dynamic that even I was not conscious of, and I was sort of avoiding. So when I was doing ministry, I realized, that I wouldn't tell people that I studied this or I love this, and I wouldn't tell my ministers, hey, 목사님s, we'll go and watch fighting today. I wasn't doing that. I was just privately watching, the UFC, who's fighting, who's not, etc. So, but through the experience, I realized that I was doing this. And that I was maybe worried about how society would look upon it. Reverend Moon's son, he's also a reverend, and he likes cage fighting. How's that gonna, how that's gonna be? We thought he liked flower arrangement. Which I do, by the way, okay? And yes, I do like gardening as well. I love it. But anyways, I also do love cage fighting. It is a true martial art. And so I realized, yes, this is a dynamic in my own self I wasn't aware of. And I realized that I was somehow ashamed of that and trying to hide it. And it's not like I'm trying to hide, drugs or, drinks or something. This is martial arts, but in my own mind, I'm feeling ashamed about this. Do you see what I mean? And so I also realized that was a dynamic. But in reflecting on a greater scope, I also realized, wow, this timing is also uncanny too, because I'm now in my 30s, and taking up this kind of training again is so taxing in your 30s. This is something you should be doing in your teens. I recommend having your kids study MMA when they're 5 years old. Start them young. They should learn mixed martial arts when they're young, very young. And also, girls too, absolutely should learn mixed martial arts. But start young. The younger the better, because there's so much to learn. There's so many disciplines you have to learn. So many thousands of techniques you have to learn, and you have to master them. You have to be able to do them on the spot. So you have to be like a PhD in martial arts and fighting. And this kind of martial art is not theoretical martial arts. This is also, I also realized this. It was, there are theoretical types of martial arts. Of course, we know. Martial arts, there's martial arts that say, if you do this, then the person will die, and you tap them here, you tap them in the acupressure points, pew, 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 and they will be paralyzed. Right, these kind of legends. And now the world doesn't believe that because of MMA, because we know it's simply not true. Right, so those kind of martial arts cannot claim those things anymore. And now in the modern day, if you're a martial artist and you're claiming, if I do this, this will happen. Unless, and if it's something, if there's other mixed martial artists there, they'll say, oh really, you tried on me? Or they say, where did you see that actually work in any example of real fighting? So the difference between mixed martial arts and then other types of traditional martial arts is that many traditional martial arts became very theoretical. So you have styles, many styles in China, many styles in Japan, in Asia, that became very theoretical as they came out of combat and they became more like meditative forms. But they kept claiming that even through Tai Chi you can push somebody and they go flying across the room. Whereas if you actually fight somebody who is skilled in the disciplines of real fighting, you can't do that. No chance. So one big difference is, of course I felt, is that as I started training again, the mixed martial arts, then I also found myself becoming much more, how do I say, less interested in the theoretical, just in the theoretical arts, and sort of rediscovering this kind of realism, which is very real in mixed martial arts. You're only going to use what is effective. And so there's this element of realism. It's always real. It has to be able to be used in real combat. That's the whole purpose of the mixed martial arts refining itself. So that element of realism was also something that I found, wow, this is great to rediscover this again. And I realized, wow, the timing is so interesting too. Because Father said to me, he said to me just this time, when I was training, I trained in some dojos when we were in America too. And he said to me, you're you're now 33, I'm turning 33 American age. And he says, Jesus died on the cross. He died when he was your age. You have to be ready to be crucified. You see? And I realized, yes, Father. Right? Have to be able to be ready for serious training, you know? And difficult things. Difficult training. And so that was actually encouraging, because that day I felt terrible because I was injured and hurt my neck and anyways, all those kind of things. And so actually through this I learned many, many things. The last about 1.5 years being with Father, of course, many other things, but something that has really been an evolution even for myself in understanding more about myself, also rediscovering something that I really loved. And also Father, and I also realized, maybe this is the most important thing I realized. I realized that because I had been trained at the prestigious universities and most of the in the Ivy League culture, in the academies, we'll call it the academies. Obviously, it's a secular institution. It was founded by religious roots, but most of the academies, as you know, have totally diverged from their religious roots. And Harvard, as you know, is extraordinarily liberal, extremely liberal, super liberal. They're on the forefront of gay rights and, whatever. Super liberal. And, of course, if you're in those institutions, you quickly realize that people who are very liberal are not actually liberal. They're not actually open-minded people. They're extremely closed-minded people. Because if you hold another view, actually, the whole idea of liberalism is that you have to accept other people's views, and we have to work through dialogue, and we have to understand, all this kind of thing. But actually, if you're in the academy, you'll realize very quickly there is an orthodoxy. And if you don't fit that orthodoxy, you will be persecuted. You will be persecuted. You will be, basically outcast. Anybody who's been in most of those universities, you either have to buckle to that pressure, you have to just accept the values they give you, or risk being ostracized and seen as, he's a weird one, he's a conservative, or he has different views than us. Well, I thought you were liberal. I thought that was okay. Of course, I realized it's not okay. So, one thing I also realized is that I had been so heavily influenced by that type of social pressure. What would my Harvard professor think, right? What would my Harvard professor think if he saw this sermon, me talking about, MMA and cage fighting? Oh, Mr. Moon, you've certainly digressed. There's this kind of fear. What would my teacher think? What would my peers think, etc.? And so I realized, wow, that I had been very much more interested in pleasing the social norm. Or let's say, that's not even the majority of America, for example. The majority of America is not super liberal. But at least that elite sort of academic intellectual group. And I realized, am I trying to shape my life to please these people? What purpose is that in eternity? Zero. Zero purpose for eternity. It means nothing. If we believe true parents are the Lord of the Second Advent and the Messiah, then you have to have a different priority, right? So one thing I realized is that I realized that actually because I was so heavily pressured, through the academies, and of course, as you know, even in our own communities, we have pockets of members who lean very left and also create that kind of environment. Oh, you're not unenlightened if you don't believe like me. So we have that even in our community, right? And I realized at some level, I was ashamed of true father. At some level. Because he's so opposite of what these people want a religious leader to be. You see what I mean? He's so opposite. They want a soft-spoken, behave nicely, finish within 20 minutes. They want something that they can accept. And of course, the world wants that when they want a Messiah. Yeah, give me a Messiah that fits my needs. Right? Not God. Who cares about God? My needs. Fits my taste. Being with Father for a year and a half, I realized very quickly, no, he's not like this. He is not like the Dalai Lama. He's not like the Dalai Lama. I met the Dalai Lama, and of course, as a meditator and a person who has tremendous insight into psychology, into human psychology, how the mind works, I respect. Right? And many times I also, and of course when I met him, it was a great joy for me. I was studying Buddhism at the time and compared it with Christianity, meditative traditions. So huge honor for me. I had, I lived with Tibetan monks for a year and a half or something like that. And so, of course yes, he's so wonderful. He's so soft-spoken. He has a nice smile. He's like a Yoda master, like Yoda. Or something like that. But being with Father, you very quickly realize he's not the Dalai Lama. You realize Father is totally different. Totally different. In Hundoke, he will scream at you. He will curse you. Father will say things about you that you've never even heard of. He will, speak about extremely, speak about things that usually religious people are not supposed to be talking about. Like absolute sex and male organ, female organ, and going into details and all this thing. So very quickly, I realized, wow, he's not like what I thought Yoda was like. But who knows, maybe Yoda's quite scary. If you train under him, I bet you he's scary. Yoda's like a mixed martial artist. I bet you he's very scary master. But no, I realized, hey, I actually was ashamed of how eccentric and strong Father was. In my own mind, because it's much more digestible, I almost wanted to think that Father was kind of like the Dalai Lama. You know? And yeah, that would be much easier to present to the world. But I quickly realized, no, Messiah is not the Dalai Lama. Messiah is totally different. He's not doing things to just please your ears. He will curse you out. See, this is the thing, actually, what you all lose in translation, Father uses enormous amounts of profanity, enormous amounts. You don't get that in the translations. Did you know this? Did you know that Father uses profanities immensely? If you speak Korean, you will know. You will know. He curses a lot. I don't think they translate it into Japanese either. No. See, so if you're not speaking Korean, you're not getting how actually hard and strong this language is that he's speaking. It's not like polite Korean. When the politicians come up and they speak polite Korean, that's not how Father's talking. I know that's how it sounds in translation. That is not how it sounds if you know Korean. He's cursing. He's calling you prostitutes. He's calling you, dogs. He's calling you, S-word, all sorts of stuff. But this is something that actually is very important. Very important. See, we lose that because, of course, we don't want to offend anybody and we don't want to, shock everybody, Messiah cursing and all that. No, the Messiah curses. Did you know that Martin Luther, who was, of course, the starter, thank you for the delayed reaction. But Martin Luther, for example, who started the Protestant Reformation, he cursed like crazy. Did you know Martin Luther, in his writings, he uses so much profanity, enormous amounts of profanity, huge amounts of profanity. It's many times not translated into the English, but in the originals, he uses so much cursing. Martin Luther. And this, as you know from principal perspective, this is preparing the foundation for Christianity and the Lord of the Second Advent. The person who's leading that is one of the biggest cursers in the world. He curses like crazy, uses so much profanity. Now, I'm not saying go home and start cursing at your kids. That's not what I'm saying. But Martin Luther used profanity. He had a reason why. He had a theological reason why he used profanity. And the whole reasoning behind that is, of course, he's attacking the Catholic Church and the corruption of the popes. And so what he's doing is he's saying that the Pope has become Satan, or, the church has become Satan. And so thus, by cursing at it, he's bringing to light the depravity of the Pope or whatever. You see, so he had actually a theological reason why he was using not only strong language, he's cursing. He's using profanities. Okay, so if you understand then, in light of that Father uses profanities, then you can start understanding, actually, it's in a different way. Because we have evil within us and we have sin within us, and because he's the Lord of Second Advent, and because he's the representative of God, God's substantial body, then when he sees sin, which all of us have, he can curse at us. He has absolute right to curse at you. And me, of course. And he does so. He does so maybe every other 3 days. So I'm blessed. I only get cursed at every other 3 days. But do you see the theological point? It's very important. Now, I realize also that because of, in my 20s, I'm trained in polite society because, we're in the academies. You got to be polite. You don't curse and you don't use profanities in critical writing and your papers. You can't use that unless you're quoting something. Okay, so you're taught not to behave like that. So when I actually learned Korean, I knew some level of Korean, but obviously doing ministry, I know much more Korean now. I'm much more fluent in my Korean, so I can even do speeches in Korean. And so my Korean has become much better. And then at some points, I would ask my wife, I would say, Amma, what is that word that Father is calling us? What does this mean? Because I don't find it in the dictionary. I don't know what it means. Oh, that word. Oh, he's basically calling you a filthy bastard or prostitute or something like that, Oh, is that what he is calling me? Okay, no. But basically in his words, he talks about, he uses very often. Okay, if you're Korean, you know it. If you're Korean, raise your hand, please, if you understand Korean. Okay, people who are Korean, you have heard Father using profanities. Yes? Are there any Korean people in this room? All right. Oh, yeah, there they are. Okay, they've heard it, of course. But actually, so of course, then I think the most important point is that I learned Father was not, that I was hoping for maybe a Messiah that was a little more socially acceptable. And maybe hoping for a Messiah that maybe would, not curse as much and speak in a gentle voice and, speak 20 minutes and whatever, okay? This kind of thing. I realized, wow, I had all these judgments on Father without even knowing it. You see? And I realized, wow, a lot of even our churches and our communities have the same feeling and the same judgment on Father. This is also something I realized. Somehow we as a community have become ashamed of how Father is as the Messiah. You see what I mean? And if we look into our heart, you have probably felt at least some of what I'm talking about. So I also realized that, which was very important, very important. Because too often, human beings want God to be the way they want and not accept how He is. And this was the same thing with Jesus. Human beings wanted a Messiah that was not like Jesus. Jesus was also so radical. One thing I realized being with Father is he is really, truly like Jesus. We don't have a schedule. You can't make a schedule. I can't make an appointment. Today is a miracle. Do you understand? At any point, any time of the day, my schedule changes. I can't make a promise. I can't go to the doctor's office. I can't make an appointment because it can change depending on whether the Messiah wants to go to Jericho or Jerusalem or the Red Sea today. You see what I mean? Actually, I realized, wow, the disciples also experienced this. Because the Lord lives in the revelation, I realized, whoa, the disciples, when they're following Jesus, it's not like Jesus told them, next Saturday we will go to Jericho. At 3 o'clock we will leave and meet by the camels And make sure you have a drink of water before you come. No. You went to sleep, he could wake you up at 2 in the morning and say, we're going now. And you better get up and say, we're going, Lord, I'm coming. That's what I also felt. I also realized the disciples of Christ also experienced this kind of constant unease and instability, not being able to control your life or your patterns at all. And that's, for most of us, that's extremely difficult. Right? Because we need to have some kind of pattern to help us, get through. And obviously, little differences sometimes, but not like radical things every day. Right? So I also, experienced that and realized, Father is truly like Christ in that manner. However, he's different from Christ also in many other manners. Because also when Christ, even in the Christian tradition, is to return, he doesn't return with the same love ethic that Jesus taught when he was here the first time. So when he was here the first time, then we all know the scriptures that say, when somebody strikes you, turn the other cheek, or when, this kind of radical love ethic. Even in the Christian tradition, because Christ is to return, and the vision of him returns in the book of Revelation. When he does return, he is not a nice guy. When Christ returns, Christ is not coming with the love ethic. He's not coming to be struck and to give the other cheek. When Christ returns, he comes as the judge. He comes hard. He comes strong. He descends from heaven and he judges. This is within the Christian tradition. Most Christians don't want to pay attention to that. Right? But actually it's prophesied within their tradition. Christ, he returns hard. He comes strong. He's not the painted image of Christ that we see just floating along and always gentle, practicing Tai Chi every morning. No, he is going to punch your teeth out. He's going to send you to hell. That's judgment. Judgment is sending you to hell. That's worse than punching your teeth. I'd rather have my teeth punched out. Right? He's coming to judge you, coming to send you to hell. So this is a very different Christ. Right? Now, that's prophesied within the Christian tradition. That's mainstream Christianity. However, even though God inspired that, and he has inspired the Christian tradition to know that, when they see true Father, and even us, if we're from the Christian tradition and we became members, and when we see Father, then what happens? We end up judging him by the previous Jesus era of the love ethic. Oh, why isn't he speaking too nice? Or why is he yelling and cursing? Why is he speaking, screaming? And why is he so hard on True Mother today? Or why is he so hard on, we will see this even in our own hearts. But we have to remember, this is the Lord of Second Advent. He's not here to make us feel good. He's here to bring the sword, to bring the scathing truth. Now this was very hard for me to digest even in my own mind, because I have to be with him every day. And yes, it's nice if you can see Father once a month or, once a year. you can kind of mentally prepare for, even if he's screaming or he grabs your head and like smacks you. In Nigeria, I got smacked, huge hook punch, like boom. You know? You can kind of mentally prepare. If you get that maybe once every 3 months or once every week, once every month, maybe you can like mentally prepare for that. But if you, it's not that I get punched in the face every day, but you never know when you're going to get smacked in the face. So there's always that nervousness, you understand? There's always that nervousness which is there. And I realized, that aspect, seeing true Father in that light, even though I understand this theologically, yes, I understand when the Lord, the second advent, returns, he will be a judge and he will be strong and he will be hard and he will be like a fighter and he will be, not a nice guy. I understand that, but when I have to actually encounter that quite often, then I find myself, actually, even though I know it in my mind, I find myself struggling. You see what I mean? And then I have to remind myself, I have to go through very strong reminders. Oh, yeah. Like this. So also, I realize that being with Father, he's never what we want him to be, or never what society, of course, expects him to be. He really is a fighter. I was training with one of my coaches, actually yesterday morning. We had he just tortures me. And, but afterwards, I was talking to him, and I told him about the church, because he was asking me, he was saying, I don't know of so many people in Korea who are ministers, who are, or who are training MMA, I don't know so many ministers who are, doing that. Because he looked me up on the internet, or, whatever. And so I was explaining to him, we're different. We're different from other religions. Before I tell you that, I want to share with you one very important experience, which is, we have to understand about the various religious traditions, that there are various conclusions that each one of them has. Okay, so for example, where I mostly studied was more like the meditative tradition. So that would be, different forms of meditative traditions in Buddhism, also contemplative prayer in Christianity, different forms of that. So that's where I focus my studies on. And so when you go to those communities, you train, you practice, and you pray with those communities, you will find some of the most gentle, loving, kind people that you ever met. I mean, you will find some of the most kind people that you ever met in your life. And I appreciate them. I appreciate them. When I was with them, praying with them, so I was very appreciative. So that's one. For example, those meditative traditions, then they have a conclusion. The conclusion is, how do you make world peace, or how do you change the world, etc. The conclusion is, you do it by, meditative process. You do it by mental training. And if I change, one person at a time, I change, and each person, if they can have enlightenment or reach some higher level of consciousness, then the world can change, right? So you've heard this kind of process. So that you will find within most of the meditative communities who practice meditation as maybe their central practice. There will also be forms of yoga in Hinduism as well, or Indian religions. Okay, then you have other traditions like Christianity, which is, for example, the Protestant base would be adherence to the biblical scripture. Okay, the conclusion is it's through the scripture that we will find, and the scripture and making ourselves obedient to the scripture, bending ourselves into following the scriptures, into following the life of Christ, etc. Then that's how we will change the world. And of course, we know from principal perspective, they did. They did. They prepared the way for the Messiah, transformed the world. Christianity was the prepared religion to also set the foundation for democracy, right? The democratic world, the world of the, quote, modern world where we see the most progress ever in human history, right? So that's another conclusion. And Islam would be obedience to the Quran. Submit yourself to the Quran. Be obedient to the Hadith, the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. And then through that process, then there will be world peace. But what about Unification Church? What's our process? I asked this in my own mind, and I realized we don't know. We don't know. At least I felt that. I don't know. I don't know if we really, what would be the unique process that we're offering? Maybe some people will say, well, families. We want to build families. Well, every religion wants to build families. You know, what is it? What is the process? What is our... What is it that we say, this will make world peace, or this will bring the kingdom of heaven on earth? It's not clear. It didn't feel clear to me. We didn't have a clear picture of that. And so that's why I found myself studying other religions. Because I didn't actually feel that we had a clear picture of it internally. So I studied other religions. And as you know, I studied more in the meditative traditions throughout my 20s. And I am greatly indebted, of course, to meditation, mental practices, very indebted. They've helped me immensely in many, many aspects. Very helpful. For the first blessing, very helpful. But you know what I realized? That whole process of I train my own mind, and then I help motivate somebody to train their own mind, and this, and then you'll see some charts where there's an exponential growth. So if 3 people do this, and then each one of those 3 people train 3 people, then each one of those 3 people train 3 people, and then each one of those 3 people train 3 people, then you'll have this exponential growth, and within basically 7 or 9, I think 7 revolutions, 7 rotations of that exponential process, then the whole world will be transformed. Right? You may have heard that thing too. But you know, I realized with that, it's so idealistic. And honestly speaking, because I taught meditation, not only did I practice it, I taught it. And I realized it's so different. But when you teach meditation, you find out very quickly that most people, 99.9% of people, do not take it as seriously as you do. You see? Maybe as a relaxation thing or something. They're not going to want to train 12, 14 hours a day. Most people will never even think about that. You see what I mean? So basically, it's like an elite form of practice. And in that kind of realm, there's no way. See, it will bring world peace. No way. You know why? Because it forgets the reality that there are very evil realities in our world and very evil people. There are tyrants and bullies in every single elementary school and high school. And if you say to them, I'm going to study meditation, they'll come and beat you up. That's what happens, right? There are bullies. Every school has one. And then you take that to the national scale, that's a tyrant. If that bully then, who was a bully throughout elementary school, a bully through middle school, a bully through high school, a bully through college, a bully through this, that bully then eventually gets national power, what do you call that? That's a tyrant, right? Because that person is going to act solely in his benefit or his group, right? So basically a tyrant is the same thing as a bully, right? They're still using that force to dominate people, right? So in that kind of reality, if you understand the world actually is like that, which it is, then you realize even if you trained all day meditation, how are you going to get somebody like that to train? Because in the end, they have to create the enormous effort to train. You see what I mean? It's not possible. It's literally an impossible task. Now, I'm not saying meditation is useless or whatever. No, I value it greatly. But I also was very highly motivated and took it very seriously. But there's not, although most people will probably not want to do that. So that's what I realized when I was teaching meditation. So I realized that actually that is not the way that we are going to bring world peace. That's not. Especially when true parents are here, right? The principle promises that the kingdom of heaven shall be created while the Lord is second advent here. Even if that process of one mental training and two mental training, even if that would work, that would still take so much time. And every generation, you have a whole new group of young kids. Some of them turn out okay, some of them become bullies. How are you going to train that? You got to train that whole new group every 20, 30, 40 years. How are you going to do that across the world? Systematically. And with meditation process, if you know anything about meditation, you have to do the work. Nobody else can do the work for you. You have to work through it. You have to be highly motivated to do it. You see what I mean? So I realized, no, this is idealistic. This is not practical. There's no way we're going to get the kingdom of heaven like this. Even though I'm a meditator, I realized that is the huge limitation. Huge limitation. But you know something? You know, right now in my life, I am truly content. Finally content being a unificationist. Not like pudgy-budgy and wishy-washy and a portion here, a portion there. Even when I was in ministry, because I didn't have how are we actually going to make world peace or how are we actually going to change nations. I didn't have the answer to that. And I didn't hear anybody who could articulate it to me in a way that was actually could stimulate my intellect and say, oh, that would actually revolutionize countries. You see? And so I always had this reserve, and I always find myself when I was stressed out and and people bothering me, then I would say, I'm gonna leave and become a Buddhist monk, stop bothering me. I always had this kind of, sort of this kind of, reservation. I don't know, can you guys understand that? You understand? But something has happened in our movement, and it's finally completely exciting me about the principle. I really want you all to understand this because it's so critical. Kook Jin-young, who is in charge, he's doing many works in Korea, also Japan. He's trained in a different disciplines, obviously. He's trained in economics. And then also as a businessman, he's been a businessman in the free market. Succeeded there. That's something none of the two children have done really in the free market, to succeed in a business. So he has that experience. He's also has experience in investing, so he's invested in like he understands kind of global politics, because you need to understand that for proper investments. So he has like these different experiences. And right now, of course, you've heard some of the lectures with Strong Korea, and you may have heard Freedom Society. Maybe you haven't, maybe not, but he'll probably talk on that, I think, when he comes a couple of days later. Do you understand? This is probably the most exciting thing that has happened in our movement for the last 30 years. 30 plus years. You have to understand the insight that he discovered. As a theologian, I am blown away. Blown away. It's so simple too. It's so simple. We all saw it, but it's so amazingly profound. He calls me one day. He's studying principle. He calls me one day and says, "Hey, Hyung, did you look at the principle of creation?" I said, "Yeah, of course I looked at the principle of creation. I've taught it. And he's talking about, this. He asked me, even when you look at the part 2 of the principle, where we're into the world wars and we're into the Allied forces and Hitler and all these kind of issues, modern issues, principle does many things. See, principle is not only a religious scripture that's only talking about spiritual things, or quote, what we usually refer to as religious things, mental processes or types of prayer, this kind of thing. This is not, principle is not like that, as you know. It's, of course, it's lots of biblical support, biblical interpretation, also providential history, but also what it does, it makes a lot of analysis, international analysis, especially in the second part, right? So international is between nations. So which nations are on God's side, which nations are on Satan's side? The world wars, and World War I, World War II, Hitler and Stalin and the Allied forces being victorious and preparing this or that foundation. So you have this international analysis, right, that the principle does. But what we haven't been able to do for the last 30 years, and all of you have experienced this, all of you. I think this has probably been the most frustrating thing of being a unificationist, probably the most frustrating. You see, even if you look at unification thought, we, for example, use like the natural sciences. In theology, we have the natural sciences in there. But we don't have a huge part of learning, which is what? Which would be, one part of that would be like the social sciences. We don't have the sociological aspect. We didn't have the political science aspect, and we didn't have the economic aspect. So if somebody asked you, how would the kingdom of heaven run? What kind of system would that be? What kind of politics would be there? What kind of economics? What kind of policies would be in place? We have zero answer for that. We don't have an answer. You see what I mean? Now this has been very frustrating for me because, all right, we have the theological, we have the providential history, the interpretation of the Bible, but what about the social and the political and the economic? We say the kingdom of heaven will come. How is it going to look like? And all of you know, that in our tradition, at least in how I felt, If we had a nation, how would that look like? I heard many, many leaders talking about something of a theocracy, right? Kind of interpreting Father's word and saying, implying we would make a theocracy. Well, the Taliban is a theocracy, right? Look at some of the examples of theocracies in history. Is that something that actually is inspiring? Not to me. Do I want to be part of building that? I don't know. I don't think so. That's not inspiring. Theocracies have always been oppressive and dominating their citizens. So what if the Unification Church, what if we did have political power? What if we did have the power to run the nation? How would we run it? Would we mandate everybody have to become a Unification Church member? How would we do that? You see what I mean? You've definitely thought of these things, no? You have to have, because you live in the world. Now, these are huge issues because the world is interested in these issues. And so are we. But honestly, we didn't have an answer to it. So our community, some people lean super left. A lot of our young people lean a lot left. Not all. And then we have also the very strong conservative side. So we've just basically adopted, well, we look at it's either Democrat or Republican if you're in America. Okay, I agree with that. I agree with that. And, you know. But what about the unification perspective? What is the unification perspective on that? What is our perspective on the social policies or the political policies? What is our policy on education and healthcare and the war on drugs? And what is it? Right? On abortion and this kind of things. You see what I mean? Did you guys feel a little frustrated about this? Come on, be honest with me. You're telling me you've never been frustrated about this, that we have no answer for this? You see, we can't provide a vision. See, we can through our theology, we can show that it's here. Lord's Advent is here. The world will change. And how? How is it going to change? That we couldn't show. That's a huge part missing from our picture of the future. Huge part. You see what I mean? So we could fight communism, we can beat communism, but we can't help the nations. Then what do you do after? What do you do after? How do you set up your nation after in a way that's going to really create the kingdom of heaven? How are you going to do that? You see, that was the thing for me, which is, why don't we have this? And so I found myself as a minister not even talking about politics, not even talking about those things. I just focused on the religious stuff. Did you guys find yourself doing this too? If you taught principle? You see, it's so amazing, you see, how we interpret Father's words can radically change our view of the social future, for example. You know, in Father's book autobiography, the first chapter is, what is it entitled? What is the first chapter of the title of True Father's autobiography? Come on. Food is love. Doesn't that sound so cozy? All of you want some food right now. Can I keep going, or do you want some food? Okay, I'm going to try to wrap it up quick. I know I've been going long. But listen, but the food is love thing, right? Now, I've heard many people interpret it like this. Look, Father is into sharing. Is into redistribution. So Father is promoting in this chapter that even the government should be into redistribution. We should, share with all those, share with everybody. What we have, we should share. Okay, that's one way of interpreting it. Honestly speaking, with that interpretation, that sounds very much like communism. At least the rhetoric of communism, it sounds very much like it. Okay? But that's one way of interpreting it. I've heard that many times. The second way, there's also another way to see it, actually more clearly, I believe, which is what? Look at the story. Look at the story. Father, his family, you see, his family is giving their food to people. You see the difference? Do you understand the difference? Can you understand the difference? Yes or no? This is a huge difference. One is saying, I don't want the responsibility. Just the nation can share it to everybody. Redistribute. That's socialism, communistic framework. The second one is called philanthropy, where that individual person decides to give what they have and what they work for and what they've earned. That's called philanthropy. That's totally different. That is totally different. That has individual responsibility huge in it. You're not giving that burden to anybody else. You're doing it. You're doing it. You're freely choosing to do it. Government is not taxing you or taking it from you without your choice and then redistributing. You are freely choosing to give to a person. You see, that's philanthropy. That's totally different. That social system is different. You see what I'm saying? Totally different. Now, if we choose to interpret it one way, we can actually imbibe that as our core concept and say if we have a nation, then try to build a nation on that. We'll make communism. We'll make an economically invalid system that cannot work, that will not bring prosperity to its people, because we've seen every example of communism fail. Every single one. Sounds good, tastes great, fails. Right? And Father, of course, we also all cannot deny that Father has fought against communism forever. Right? I'm using that non-literally. Radically strong against communism. You see, what Kuk-jung has discovered is this very simple thing. He asked me this question when he called me up. One day he called me up and he said, "Hey, I've been reading principally. I've been thinking, in the Garden of Eden, you have Adam, you have Eve. Of course, you have God, but you have the three, creations of God: Adam, Eve, and the archangel." And he asked me, don't think internationally or don't think just personally. Let's think about intranationally. That means within a nation. Within a nation, what role would be the role of government among these three? Would government take the role of the Son of God? Would government be Adam's position? Would the government be in Eve's position, or the daughter of God? Or would the government be in the position of the servant of God's children? Which one? Yeah, we know this. We call government officials public servants, right? In democratic states, we call them public servants. They're supposed to be servants of the public, right? So this is quite obvious. If you think about it, it's quite obvious. Very, very simple insight. This is huge. You see, he goes on to explain that you can actually see the fall of man, and you can see the destruction of freedom in the same process. So, for example, Adam and Eve are created by God. They are God's children. God gives them the three blessings. To have individual perfection, family perfection, and to have family, and to have dominion over creation. He gives them, he wants to inherit all things that God has to them, to the children. Right? We know this from principle. What happens in the fall? Satan reverses that, right? So Adam and Eve were supposed to be in dominion of Satan. Right? Satan reverses that. He ends up being in dominion of Adam and Eve. Right? Adam and Eve were to inherit the three blessings. What happens? Satan inherits the three blessings. He takes Adam and Eve. He takes their individual. He takes the family lineage. Right? The second, he takes the family lineage of Adam and Eve. And then he takes all things. Right? So he's the king of the world, right? As he tempted Jesus with the treasures of the world and the kingdoms, right? So he reversed it. What was supposed to be Adam and Eve's, Satan stole. God gave Adam and Eve something that is so valuable. He gave them something that is so important. So important. It is probably the most important thing. You know what he gave them? He gave Adam and Eve? What did he give Adam and Eve? He gave Adam and Eve freedom. He gave them freedom. He gave them free will. He told them what's bad and what's good. He told them how they should live and how they should behave. He told them straight. But he gave them the freedom to choose to live or to die. And that they would have to live with the consequences. So what does that mean? It means responsibility. Freedom and responsibility God gave to Adam and Eve. Now, I know we say true love is the most important thing. But what do we also know about true love? Can true love exist if God's object partner does not freely choose to love God back? Can true love exist? Can it exist from a principle perspective? Come on. It can exist. It cannot exist. Even true love cannot exist without the prerequisite of freedom. Do you see? Freedom is so important to God. So important. The free choice and the responsibility. This is essential. Now, of course, God could have taken away Adam and Eve's freedom, right? I had one sister ask me, she said, I was kind of hoping for a world in like the kingdom of heaven, maybe many generations later, our children have, all the blessed families have repopulated the world, right? And now we have the true lineage. And now there will be a world of no sin. You should be laughing. You should be laughing. Because even we have sin now. Right? I mean, and then she said to me, well, I was kind of hoping that would be the kingdom, isn't there going to be a world with no sin? And I said to her, sister, the principle, what did God give to Adam and Eve? Right? He gave them free will. See, there's a danger with free will, I guess, if you want to say it, right? On the one hand, Adam and Eve can choose to love God. So, on the one hand, you can have true love. You can actually create true love. With freedom, with free will, you can actually have the possibility true love can exist. Okay, that's the awesome upside. The downside, the risk, let's say the risk of giving Adam and Eve free will is, what is it? That they will sin, right? They'll choose death over life, right? Doesn't that make sense? There's that risk. God could have played it safe. He could have just made them robots and just been happy with just like puppy dog obedience, which is pretty good. I have some puppies. I raise dogs. It's pretty good. But it's nowhere near my relationship with my wife, right? So he could have made Adam and Eve without free will, could have had those robots, those nice little creatures that wagging their tails and, the puppy dog eyes and everything. Doing all sorts of tricks for Scooby snacks and, that kind of thing. But God didn't choose that. He chose to give them freedom. He took the risk. Did God trust? Did God believe in human beings? If you listen to the story, did he believe in human beings or did he not believe in human beings? Come on, people, wake up. I know you're sleeping. Did he believe in human beings or did he not believe in human beings? He actually believed in Adam and Eve. He had his heart broken, that's true. But he believed in Adam and Eve. Now, who was the one who said, no, we can't trust them? No. Are you kidding me? You want to trust them with everything? No, you can't trust them. Are you kidding? Those kids will ruin everything. Who did that? Yeah, Archangel did that. Did Archangel trust human beings or did he not believe in human beings? Did he believe or not believe? He didn't believe. See, what we understand, if we understand this, we can actually see. We can actually see how, government and the people who work in government, they're not evil. They're not necessarily just bad people. If you go meet those people, they're nice. So Kook Jung's not making a comment about the people who work in government, right? He's actually making a comment about the nature of the institution of government. You see what I mean? You got to be clear about that. Because I hear a lot of people misunderstanding what he's saying. Right? Oh, Kook Jin just is promoting freedom because he wants to sell more guns. or oh, Kook Jin is, it's kind of actually infantile statements. They're not actually listening. They're just judging right away. They're not actually listening to what he's saying. I had one person tell, this freedom society, this is based on fear. It's a fear-based theology. The strong Korea. This is like a fear-based theology. You're scared of China, and that's why Korea should become strong. Do you see how absolutely incorrect that assessment? That's an absolutely incorrect judgment of the lecture. The lecture is actually talking about preserving freedom. That's the point of it. The whole thing is about preserving freedom for the citizens of South Korea. Protecting the success they've had until now. See, that's the actual thesis. The thesis is not fear-based. It's actually totally hopeful. It's hoping for a free world, not an oppressed world. But it's realism. It's like Reinhold Niebuhr Christian realism. It's a realism that says we don't live in an idealistic world. We don't live in a world where tyrants don't exist. Bad people do exist. Bullies exist. And they bully people from elementary school on. Tyrants exist. So Reinhold Niebuhr, for example, was saying, as Christians, we cannot stay still while Hitler is committing genocide over over Europe. Right? So he was writing during the World Wars. And in particular, he was using Hitler as an example. Why Christians have to fight. Why Christians have to fight such an evil as Hitler. Okay? So basically, it's a just war theory. He's saying we have to go to war. We have to fight. Because if we don't, as Christians, then millions of people will be killed. So the Jesus ethic of turn the other cheek does not work here. We will be responsible for the death of millions if we do not fight this tyrant. Right? So this was Reinhold Niebuhr's class, Christian realism. It's realistic. Obviously, Reinhold Niebuhr has had experience with bullies. You see? And so Kuk Jung actually, when he's making his analysis, he's very realistic. Very realistic. And so what would then be, and what I realized, I can't get everybody to meditate, and I can't get everybody to put in the arduous hours of mental training to become kinder people. It's not going to happen. It's not happening. I tried it. It just doesn't. It's so rigorous. But you know what? Every person on the face of this planet, you know what all of them, every single one, yearns for? Every single one. Every single person on the face of this planet, black, white, Asian, whatever, yearns for freedom. If you have the choice between being free or being a slave, I guarantee you, maybe there's some crazy people, but I guarantee you, the 99, probably 0.9% will choose, I want to be free. I don't want to be a slave. Yes or no? Right? People want to be free. Why? Because it's in our original mind. It's the original gift of God. He gave us freedom. He gave us freedom to choose. To actually, but it comes with that. Remember, what comes with that? Responsibility. If you just choose to do whatever you want and spit on people and do that, you're gonna pay in some way. Right? So then you're going to reap the consequences of that, of those actions. Right? So freedom obviously is a responsibility. Everybody in this world yearns for freedom. Everybody wants freedom. What is, and I was talking to one of my coaches the other day. He's not a member. He's a UFC fighter. And after practice, I told him, he was asking me, so what does the Unification Church actually believe? And I explained to him, well, we believe Reverend Moon is the Messiah. He's the Lord of the Second Advent. That he will bring a teaching that is radically different. Radically different. And I told him, we're not like normal religions. We're not like normal religions that tell you everybody should become like the Christ consciousness or the pacifist way, or we should all, become, softer and this kind of thing. No. Unification Church, we're fighters. We are fighters for God. We are fighters for freedom. And as a pro, And of course, we're fighters for responsibility too. That's very important for us to understand that freedom and responsibility, not separatable. But basically, we're fighters. And I told him, you know, my father's a fighter. Yeah, this guy's a pro MMA fighter. He said, my father's a fighter. He fought against, when the Japanese were colonizing Korea, he fought. He risked his life. He fought against them. When he was in North Korea, he fought against the tyranny and the oppression there. He saw people being killed all over. I mean, he lived in that. I explained to him, he lived in that. He saw that. He fought against it. Even when he met Kim Il-sung, he fought with Kim Il-sung. He told him straight, you must believe in God. You know the story. And all the secretaries are shaking in their boots. We're dead, we're going to die, we're going to die, we're going to die. Father is a fighter. He's a samurai. And this is actually very consistent with what the actual prophecy in Christianity says. The Lord is going to come and he's going to judge. He's going to be strong. He's going to hurt a lot of people. He's going to send them to hell. Right? Wow, my God. And when I explained this to him, he said, you know, I don't have a religion, but this sounds very interesting. You know? And he was like, I can agree with that. I told him, look, Reverend Moons, we call him True Father, Father's vision for peace is not idealistic. He's dealt with bullies. He's dealt with torturers. He has dealt with oppression, tyrants, tyrannies. He's lived it, lived under it. He's not idealistic in his way to peace. He's not saying, good people, be weak. You see that? Father is never saying, good people should be weak. Is Father saying that? Good people should be weak. No. Good people have to be strong. Because when the bullies come and try to bully you, if you can't stand up for yourself, they will bully you. Right? And if you experience bullies, they bullied you. Good people have to be strong. So if evil people want to use strength to harm other people, then those people can step in. Right? Now this is, if you think about it, we didn't focus on this in the church. We didn't focus on this. We kind of wanted to brush our weight aside about how strong Father is, how much of a fighter he is. I realized I did that too. Father, you know, once I did the demonstrations, then he said, all the young people have to learn MMA too. So actually in Korea, our carp kids, starting from this year, in Brazil, our carp kids are already learning jiu-jitsu. They're already training in jiu-jitsu, and they're also training in MMA. And in Korea, in this year's program, they will be starting training in jiu-jitsu first, in jiu-jitsu. So in real martial arts that you can use against bigger opponents. And of course, there's practical sides to that. You can defend yourself when you're fundraising, or you can defend yourself when you're witnessing. If you're a woman, you can defend yourself against a man. That's important. If a man is trying to forcefully use his strength upon you, then you have to defend yourself. What if nobody comes to your help? How will you deal with that situation, right? So, and if our kids are out witnessing, if they're out fundraising, that tool then becomes very important. It actually can be a tool that can save a person's life, right? So we understand that in a practical level. But the other side of that is that what? Mentally, what does it do? Mentally, it makes you aware of the reality that some people may want to hurt you and you may have to defend yourself. Whereas if you always avoid this reality, then you're not prepared if that happens, right? So our CARP kids will be training from this year in Korea. And not in Japan yet, but in Korea and also in America. So Injun asked me to send some MMA guys to train the GPA kids in America. So to understand that unificationists should not be weak. We should not be bullied. But Kook Jung is, of course, making a larger analysis of the world. And you'll hear that. But basically, he's showing that you can see how free societies, democracies, collapse into tyrannies. And you can see how close they are to freedom or how close they are to tyranny based on the relationship with government and its citizens, the relationship between Archangel and Adam and Eve. We can actually finally use the principle to start analyzing socially issues. We can start using principle to see political situations. What kind of policies, right, would be enacted, right? Is it better to say we can't trust people and make all sorts of rules and regulations? What does that create? What society does that create? What are the results of that? So there's, for example, suggested readings that he suggests people to do, like John Stossel and other, like Frederick von Hayek, Milton Friedman, people who have been thinking totally different from what we see currently with Republicans and Democrats. Actually, the founding fathers of America. You see, God prepared, we know that. We know God prepared America to receive the Lord and also to bring the teachings of the Lord to the rest of the world. So Father spent 34 years of his life in America, and as you know, he continues to go back to America, even though his public mission, he says, has been completed, but Father continues to go to America. Right? Because America actually is truly different from the world. America is probably the most free place in this world. It has all sorts of problems now. Oh yeah, big problems now. Big problems. Huge problems. Ethical problems, economic problems, all sorts of problems. But as I'm talking with Kook Jung, he says, we fought to save the family in America. Remember those movements that we had in America where we were fighting for family values and fighting to save families? Remember this? Really strong, especially with the Christian ministers, and we're out there fighting. We have to reclaim family values. Kook Jung asked me, he said, who destroyed the family in America? Do you know? Who destroyed the family in America? Let's say out of Adam and Eve and Archangel, who destroyed the family? That's pretty easy. So in America, if you have that same rubric, then who would be the potential one to destroy the family? Because it's in the position of Archangel. But that sounds like a radical statement. The government destroyed families. Right? It sounds like a wacky statement. Right? If I just said, the government destroyed families, then it'd be kind of like, okay, yeah, how did it do that? What's your reasoning behind that? Right? And Kuk Jung goes on next, he explained to me, you know, prior to, I think, the early 1900s, the government in America ran on 3% of GDP. Okay, so very small, limited. Now it's like up to, I think he said 40 or 40%, if you include some, I'm not an expert in this, so if you include some, you know, additional criteria, then it's like 40%, even up to close to 50% government is using. So it's become enormous, huge. And obviously, when it becomes that big, what happens? Who's going to pay for it? Obviously, it's not going to pay for itself. Who's going to pay for it? You. You're going to pay for it. So you get taxed. Heavy, increased tax all the time. And when that's not enough, then what happens? They have to borrow, so then you get the national debt issue, all that. But in the beginning, with FDR, and you have the administrations that are promoting social welfare. Right? This sounds great. Social welfare. We can take care of every person. The politicians were using all sorts of nice things, right? We can take care of every child, and we can save lives, and, you know, this kind of thing. We can help people in need. Vote for me. And so they started a larger social welfare program, etc. What happened? What happens in that situation? You provide a very large social welfare system. First of all, you have to pay for that, so like we talked about, there's taxes, all that stuff. But what happens? With the social welfare system, if you want to get monies from the government, and you're, for example, a woman, you have to be divorced to get social welfare. And if you have dependents, you have children, then you can get welfare. But it doesn't matter with how many men you've had the children. You can have multiple partners. If you have children, you get money. Right? So, number one, what's happening? Eve, what's happening? What happened in the garden? Eve, how can you trust Adam? Look at him. He's playing around in the bushes all day. He's hunting and he's doing stupid things. How are you gonna believe him? I'm powerful. I built the world with God. What if he leaves you? What if Adam leaves you? I can take care of you better. What happens? We learn it in biology, right? What is the instinct, the survival instinct of men? Right? What is it? It's reproduction, right? So men are always interested in women. Because their basic instinct is to reproduce and spread their genes. And what is women? What is it? Finding a security. It's finding the right mate, the one that maybe is the stronger hunter or the bigger one that can protect them and their children if they have children. It's this biological instinct. That's exactly what he was tempting, right? Oh, you're going to be in danger with Adam. What if he throws you away? With me, you have a lot more security, right? You can trust me. I won't throw you away. So that happens, same thing with that policy of social welfare. You don't need your husband. You don't need your husband. Government will take care of you. We'll give you money. Don't worry. Just basically marry me. Right? Basically. Do you think that that's actually in America? If you're Korean, did you know? In Korea, we have Filipino sisters who came and got the international blessing. They live here. We had Filipino sisters come up to us and say, my God, it's the same in Korea. Because we have one sister that works in the social welfare department. And they said to her, if you want to get a social welfare check, you have to divorce your husband. So who's splitting families? Who's splitting marriages? And then, with all the babies, okay, you can have babies. You have babies. We give you money. We take care of you. Just vote for me, right? We take care of you. Doesn't matter how many men you have with you, we'll take care of the baby. What's that culture? Is that absolute sex or free sex? Do you see? There's something strange here. Why is this policy sounds so great? We're going to take care of everybody. All the, women in need will be supported. Divorce culture. Dad's no longer in the home. Dad's seen as a burden, or dad's not necessary in the home. What happens when there's no dad in the home? When you have boys who are growing up without a dad, what happens? Will you have an increase in male crime, or will you have a decrease in male crime? And you see it. You see the increase in male crime. You see the increase in divorce. You see the increase in teenage pregnancy. You see the sociological realities occur. Obviously, because something is destroying the family. Do you see what's happening? Something is promoting not an absolute sex culture, a free sex culture. It's okay. Then what happens to the ethical values then? Right? We're now talking in America about people who not only, I want to marry, same-sex marriage. That's, of course, a thing in America. But now you have people saying, I want to marry my dog. And the new thing is, why can't I marry myself? Did you hear about this? Why can't I marry myself? I love myself that much anyways. There should be a, I want to marry myself movement. I'm not joking. I am not joking. There's a movement now to marry yourself. Hello. Give me a break. Do you see what I mean? See, so what is actually happening? You have all these awesome promises the politicians are giving. Oh, we're going to change the system, take care of everybody. We're going to have free health care, free education. We're going to give it all. We're going to do all. What happens? What happens when you take away, when you start taking away the central root, the families? You start incentivizing breakups, right, in a society. What's happening? You see it in America. It is collapsing morally. Yes, of course, you'll still meet good people. They're great people. You'll meet great people. Yes, they're nice and everything. But what's happening to the society? Right? So many other issues. Are people better with freedom or not freedom? God will say, with freedom. We were having discussion with Tom Walsh, our international president of UPF. He asked, just yesterday, he asked Kook Jin-im, well, what about the vices of community, Kook Jin-im? What would happen if we gave people freedom? Aren't people irresponsible? For example, let's say drugs. How would we maximize their freedom? Wouldn't you have a problem? Or vices like prostitution, that should just be outlawed. Drugs should be outlawed. And Kook Jin responded very simply. He said, you do what God did. You teach Adam and Eve that it is evil. You teach them that. You teach them that prostitution is degrading. Right? That kind of culture. You teach them the principle. You teach them reality. What about that issue? But in the end, God let the children, He let them be responsible for their actions. So for example, this is actually a big issue in America. America had the war on drugs. You all know of this if you live in America. 20, 30 years fighting drugs. Tons of billions of your American money into the system to fight the war on drugs, right? And the idea was that we fight drugs, we kill the, we get the, the bad drug dealers. No more drugs, and we'll reduce crime, and we'll reduce drug use, etc. John Stossel does an excellent program on this. He shows it's actually the opposite about drug crime. Didn't get reduced at all. Tons of money invested in the war on drugs. No reduction in drug use. And drug crime, of course, has skyrocketed. Right? Because what happens in a social system? For example, when America outlawed drinking. Drinking is bad, so we have to make a law against it. We have to punish people, put them in prison if they drink. Would we be that kind of state? Would we be that kind of state? What happened when America tried to do that? You remember Prohibition? What happened when America tried to outlaw drinking? You have who? You have Al Capone and these kind of people come up, right? Remember that? What happened? Because what happens socially? What happens? You outlaw that vice. What happens? So CVS can't sell wine, for example, right? So nobody can sell those things, but Al Capone can take grapes, he can squash them and ferment them in his basement, and then he can sell it to you for $1,000, for $1,000. You see? He can sell you a bottle of wine for $1,000, right? So he's rich. He gets rich. The criminals get rich, and since they're rich, they got to protect that wealth. They get the money. They get the armies, the militias they create. And then they can lend to you, and then they can, if you don't pay them back, they can, what do? Break your legs, right? Throw you in the Hudson River. Right? That's what socially happens. A black market is created, right? Because now people are stripped of that freedom of choice. But what happens? The black market appears. It gives them that choice back, but at a hugely inflated price. And so now they're filthy rich. And so when you got people who can do that and become filthy rich, more kids go into there? Yeah, kids go in there. You're going to have that gang, that violence that's related to it. That's what happened with Prohibition. What happens when you get rid of Prohibition? When they legalized or decriminalized alcohol in America? What happened? CVS can now sell a bottle of wine for what? $20, right? Something like that? Whatever. Al Capone's trying to sell it for $1,000. Who's going to win? Who are you going to buy a glass of wine from if you're a consumer? From CVS for $20, right? That puts Al Capone out of business, right? Now he can't exist. And that's exactly what happened. You have this whole thing in the world, real world, with the war on drugs, for example. You have the whole issue where saying drugs are evil, so we have to criminalize people. It's gonna, and Stossel has an excellent program on this. Like I said, you got to do the suggested readings in the videos, and he shows that when same thing with drugs happens. You're creating that black market when you illegalize it. It becomes black market. Then you have all these experts come out and say, no, if you decriminalize drugs, you will have teenage usage skyrocket. You will have social anarchy. You will have destruction. It'll be like the opium era in China. You'll have all sorts of addicts on the street. There's a nation, Portugal, who actually has decriminalized drugs. They did it as a policy. So John Stossel and his reporting team, he's at Fox News, right? So he takes his team to Portugal. And all the experts in America said, you're going to see all these problems, you're going to see rise in drug use, all that. He goes to Portugal and he talks to the Department of Police. So he interviews them, and you see the interviews. What are they saying? Drug use, even now that it's legal, you can go into CVS and buy heroin and cocaine. Basically, I don't know if they have CVS in Portugal, but some, like that kind of area, and you can buy heroin and cocaine. And of course, drug use should have skyrocketed, right? It's not legal. Anybody can buy it. It should skyrocket, right? Right? What happened? It didn't go up at all. Drug use has not gone up at all. So the people who are already addicted are still addicted, so they're still using it. But see, most people don't want to die. So actually, drug use has not increased. And what happened to the crime? Drug-related crime in Portugal, he interviewed the police department. What happened to their drug-related crime? It's non-existent. It's just like Al Capone. It's gone. It's put out of business. Isn't that weird? Isn't that crazy? Do you understand? This is in the real world. I'm not making this up. Go watch his program. It's on YouTube, on Fox News. It's gone. Drug crime it's gone. What happened? I thought it was going to increase. I thought there was going to be increases all over. I thought there was going to be all sorts of problems. What happened? You see, what happens in society is actually different from what we imagine in reality. And this is what he tackles. He will show you over and over again with education. We got to invest more in the children. We got to put more money into education, right? You hear that all the times with politicians. I promise you more money in healthcare, right? All this thing. And we think it's great. What's happening? And then he goes to the issues. Education. America spends the most per child, $10,000 per child. If the argument is true, that if you put more money into education, you will have better students, then America should be number one because they're spending the most. They should have the best education. They should have the best performance. They should be number one on the international list. America is not number one, as you know, in the international performance, in math and science and those things. They're not number one. America is not number 3. It's not top 5. It's not even top 10. It's not even top 15. It's not even top 20. It's 25 internationally ranked when he made that program, which was like 2 years ago. You see, so we've been constantly wooed by certain politicians promising, oh, free this, free that, it will increase everything, it will make life. What happened? American kids cannot compete with international kids. All this outsourcing, because American kids are not, they were asking questions. In America, he went to American public school and asked them questions like, what is the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights? And they didn't know. He actually goes in and asks the students. He gives them questions, and he goes to Belgium. Belgium has a different educational system. They have a voucher system. If you know what that is. A voucher system, you can, they don't give you $10,000, but let's say $3,000. So you cut the education budget way down, like $3,000. But they give the $3,000 to the family. The family can decide how to use that money on education. So they can send the child to private school with that money. They can send them to Hagwon, like in Korea, the small private institutions of education. Or they can send them to public schools. So what happens? The public schools have to compete with the private schools, and the public schools have to compete with the privately owned educational companies, and so their education gets so much better. And so he went to Belgium, he interviewed the Belgium kids, and he gave them the same questionnaire. The American kids scored like 30% right. The Belgium kids scored 70% right about American questions. About American questions. Because the public schools have to compete with the private schools, which drives up a better quality of education because they actually have to compete. They have to, like you don't get iPad out of government, you get iPhone and iPad out of that competition, trying to make the best product, and then we as customers benefit, right? So actually, when you give people the freedom to choose where to educate their kids, not force them to go to public school, the performance gets better. And you spend less money. You don't burden the whole tax thing, and you don't burden the national deficit with the education. Wow. But this is not what you're told. This is not what teacher unions want to tell you, or want you to believe. They don't want you to believe that because they have their organization that has to sustain itself. It has to pay its employees. They're not thinking about our kids. You see, so these even social issues, we can see how the position of Archangel tempts Adam and Eve, or the citizens, to give away their freedom. Let the government do it for me. And what do they get? They get something worse. They get the freedom is stolen away, and their dependence to the government. They're no longer free. Now, how easy it is to control that kind of person if you're the government. He also does it with healthcare. Oh, free healthcare for everybody. Isn't that great? Yes, it's fantastic. Oh, he'll show you some problems with that. He'll give you the case in Britain. He'll give you the case in Canada. Free healthcare for everybody sounds fantastic. Yeah, everybody gets free healthcare. Sounds great. Doesn't that sound great? Free healthcare. What happens if you own an ice cream shop? Let's say you own an ice cream shop, right? You're selling ice cream. And today's Friday, right? Is today Friday? Okay, so you say, Friday, free ice cream. What happens? What happens on Friday? Well, what happens? Everybody comes to your shop, right? But it's free. But what happens? Is there a line or is there no line? There's a line all around the block waiting for that free ice cream. Yeah, and guess what? When you have healthcare that's free, is there going to be a line? It's free. Is there going to be a line or no line? The average wait time for an MRI, he was using the example of Britain and also Canada, is free healthcare, free MRIs. Average wait time for an MRI, 6 months. The average wait time for emergency room, when you have an emergency, you go to the hospital, you got to quickly be treated. Average wait time, you get free, it's all free. Emergency room average wait time, 23 hours. You could be dead before you're taken care of. In America, it's different. Emergency wait time average is 2 hours. Isn't that weird? And because you have this wait time, obviously you don't have the medical companies competing with each other because there's no free market. It's just been monopolized by the government. The medicine companies are not competing, so there's no innovations. There's no new medical innovations. So then as a customer, you're not getting new innovations as well. That's basically like if you don't have iPhone or iPad, right? In technology, it's the competition, the free market system that allows it to grow, that allows that innovation to occur, people to take risks and innovate. But what happens in America? It's so hard to enter into businesses now. You got so many rules and regulations that prevent you. Why? Because the big companies have colluded with the big government and made deals, and for their industry have made it harder for new competitors to come into that industry because they're the experts. The big companies are already the experts in that industry. So when the government asks about the industry of technology, they're going to ask, Apple about or whatever, or those companies who are the top, about what policies should we have in terms of entry into that market. You see what I mean? And by making it harder for young innovators or people who have good ideas to come in and take the risk of succeed or fail, then what's happening? That market is not as free, so that innovation will be less. It's so interesting that what we usually think, what government tempts us with, I'll give you free health care, I'll give you free housing and free food and free, don't worry if your family breaks up, I'll take care of you. I'll give you free education. I'll give the children, they're the future of our nation, so I will give them free education, right? What happens? What happens in reality, not in idealism? That's why I love mixed martial arts. It is reality. You're not talking about idealistic technique. You're talking about what works. How do you explain Father's vision of heaven? It sounds crazy. Did you hear his vision of Cheonilguk in the peace messages? Did you hear this vision? You heard, right? All of you heard it. You heard it. I'll repeat some of the stuff. World with no nations, boundaries, no national boundaries. World with no laws. No laws. A world with no judges or lawyers. Remember this? A peace militia and a peace police force. How is this gonna actually run? How? I have had no person in the Unification Church explain to me a comprehensive way of how this will actually run. You have no laws, and you have no boundaries, and you have no judges and lawyers, and you have a peace militia and a peace police force. I thought our way to peace was giving each other flowers and. What's this peace police and peace militia, peace army? What is this? How do you explain this? You see what I'm saying? Now, actually, this can be done. I could not believe it. Kuk Jung's telling me, yeah, Hyung, this actually can be done. I'm saying, Kuk Jung, are you crazy? You're probably the most rational person I know, and you're telling me this can be done? I'm not that stupid. No laws, and you give me a break. He's like, he tells, and he gives in a lecture. He says the closest you can come to that is what is known in economics as a self-regulating system or self-regulating society. Now, you can never go to 100% no laws. You can't, because when you deal with third parties, then you have to protect the rights of third parties. For example, if somebody's committing murder on somebody else, right, or a third party is being injured, it's not necessarily only your rights anymore. You're talking about a different party now. So obviously there has to be some laws, and there has to be some judges and some policemen, but it can be reduced to a very small level. How is that possible? What do you mean it can be reduced? And he said America was like that. America was actually like before the big government systems of the liberal left that was pushing those. It was actually being pushed in the academies, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, pushing these concepts, these ideas. I think it's a Keynesian view of economics, I believe. I believe that's, if my economics is correct. And they were pushing that. It's basically a very strong social welfare system. What many people call the Europeanization of America. And then you have the effects of that. You have America starting to use those things, because the idea is that the smartest people in the universities, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, they're the smartest, right? So they know what's best for everybody. So those people, if they get into a room, you get the smartest people in the room and get them to make the policies, they'll make the right policies for the nation. That's what they actually believed. Some, quote, smart people in some universities knows what's best for you and your family and not you. That actually sounds enormously arrogant. It sounds immensely arrogant. I graduated from Harvard twice, but it sounds so arrogant to believe that. You see? But that's the policies. Policies have been pushed like that. And so bigger government, bigger departments, this department, that department, you're taxed for everything. You may not agree with any of those departments, but you have to pay the taxes. And so, you now have a situation where it's getting so immensely big, and the American people are not able to pay for it. And they have no money, right? And even the housing bubble, they were promising all Americans should have houses. Remember that campaign? All Americans should have houses. Sounds great. Bush, the Republicans were pushing that. So it's not only the Democrats, the Republicans also now pushing big government, right? Where is the head wing? Where is the head wing? Father said we're not left wing, right wing. Where is the head wing? Where's the alternative to this? If you understand the implications of what Kook Jung is talking about in Freedom Society and Strong Able, what you will quickly realize is that if the Unification Church has even national sovereignty, we will not create a theocracy. We will not create a dictatorship. We will create a free society that is also pushing responsibility, and also it will be prosperous. I'll tell you why. In a free society, let's say before the social welfare system, remember all those things that happens with social welfare system? You have to be divorced, okay? You pay. Many dependents will pay. We talked about how that can influence sexual ethics, how that can influence the institution of marriage. Okay? But in a free society, think about it. If you have free stuff coming from government, even though you treat your parents like poo-poo, and you treat your husband and your wife like poo, and your children terribly, and you still get free food and housing from government, does that give you any incentive to treat your family members, to value those relationships? Does it give you that incentive to do it? But let's say you don't have that. Let's say you do not have money dropping from the government. Now, if you fail, let's say you're doing a business. If you fail in your business and now you're bankrupt, you're out, who's going to help you in that situation? Who's the people you're going to turn to? Who? Come on, everybody. 1, 2, 3. Family and friends, right? Your family. Now, if you're in the habit of breaking family relationships, treating people bad, being arrogant, burning bridges, if you're in that habit and you fail, people are going to help you? You're going to reap your consequences. Now, there may be family members that do help you. They will help you, but hold on one second. They will help you. Some may help you, but will they help you? Will they just keep throwing money at you? Or will they say, apologize, you idiot? Right? Grow up. Show me you can work. Show me you're not doing this to just eat off me. You know? Show me you're going to be independent. I'll help you out on that process. Family members, if they're going to help you, they know you, number one, and number two, they can help you with that process. They're not just going to throw money on you, right? What else happens in a free society where you don't just have money dropping down regardless of how you behave? What also becomes really important? Family becomes important, right? And what? Faith becomes really important. Because your faith is your community. And if you screw up and you get bankrupt or whatever, you have a real tough time, and your family, you have no more family, then who's gonna maybe help you? Your faith community. There may be compassionate people who philanthropically will want to help you. But will the church just throw money on you? They'll say, okay, you can continue to beat your wife every day. We'll keep giving you money. Will the church do that? No, they'll say, you better grow up. You better stop that. The ministers will educate you. They will teach you what God expects of you. They will teach you that what you're doing is sinful and it's evil. Right? And they will make you go through a process where, first of all, they know you, and number two, they give you the process of checking and balancing you and your behavior. Right? That doesn't happen when money falls out of the sky. Number one, if the government just throws money on you, they're not teaching you any ethical values. They're not saying, keep your family relationships, don't burn your bridges. No. You can burn your bridges, we'll pay for you. You see what I mean? So what happens in a truly free society where there's not that kind of, where the citizens do not get tempted by the archangel saying, I'll take care of you, where they're not tempted, what happens? It becomes responsible. Because first, you have to value your family relationships, because if you fail, they're going to help you. And number two, it becomes a faith. Faith becomes very important because that's your community. That will also help you if you fail. You see, so it becomes free, but it becomes responsibility is connected to that. Isn't that interesting? You see, when you give people freedom, when they give people freedom and they see people using that freedom, exploiting it in a bad way, and then their life collapses, then most people are smart. They watch that and say, oh my God, I better not act like that. And they quickly learn treating your parents like poo, or you're this or that, or being arrogant, and doing this. This is not good. This is not going to help me. I never know which bridge I may have to rely on, right? So actually what's happening in an economic system, you're incentivizing family, relationships, and also community and faith becomes very important. Whoa, that's so different. You gave people more freedom, but you have to be responsible. The family is now valued way more, and now the faith community is people have to be responsible to the faith community in order to get that help. Isn't that interesting? My God. You see, when you actually give, see, God trusted Adam and Eve. Archangel always doesn't trust Adam and Eve, and he's always trying to make us believe that we shouldn't trust Adam and Eve. We shouldn't trust the free will God gave. John Stossel does a program on guns. On guns. I know there's a big thing. A lot of Western members have been shocked that Kook Jung is talking about guns. He makes guns. Father made the Vulcan cannon. Did you know this? Did you know this? I know this. Vulcan cannon is like that, that big cannon they put on helicopters that shoot like all those huge bullets at like rapid speed. That huge cannon that rotates. The Unification Church was making Vulcan cannons. Did you know this? Yes, it's true. We made Vulcan cannons. Father he built up the Korean military. He was making like tank parts and stuff like that too. Did you know this? Why wasn't I told this in the Unification Church? The Lord of the Second Advent was making Vulcan cannons. How come nobody told me? Isn't that strange? Why did he make volcanoes? Well, our father had a very practical reason why. He lived in oppressive state. He knew what they do. And so at that was a time when there was a real threat that North Korea would come down and conquer the South. I think it was in the 80s. And so in order to arm the military, he started making Vulcan cannons. He also made air rifles, right, in Korea. Julian, right? Air rifles. Yeah, father was making air rifles too. How come nobody told you that? No. Our movement is still making things for the military. Whoa. You see how different our actual understanding of Father is from reality? The Lord of the Second returns. He makes Vulcan cannons and tank parts. He's not an idealist when it comes to peace. He's dealt with bullies his whole life. He knows that if one nation is disarmed and it's weak, tyrant nations will eat it up. And that was a real threat in the 80s here. Isn't that weird for a lot of our members who live in gated communities? Isn't that weird? Yeah, the Lord of the Second Advent, the Messiah, made huge firepower weapons. He is a fighter. Father fought for his, not his life, he fought for God. He fought against the colonies of Japan, the police. He was arrested, tortured. We know that history. Father is samurai. Not the evil samurai. The samurais of the past were evil. Not all, I'm sure, but most of it because it was only one class had that power, right? Only one class could hold the weapon, right? Only one class could hold the sword. Remember that in Japan? Only the samurai could hold the sword. And if you didn't bow to them, they cut your head off. So that's evil. That's evil. Better way is to let all the people have the katana and train. Then the samurai class cannot oppress them. You see? If the government did that, if they gave all the peasants the ability to have swords, then the samurai, can they just cut their head off when they don't bow? Can they do that? No. See, so you can see what kind of system they created, whether or not they're doing it for the dictatorship, the control of Archangel, or the freedom of Adam and Eve. And this is also what Kuk Jung's talking when he talks about the gun issue. Obviously, we know he's one of the most famous in the small arms industry. And so people will write him off and say, oh man, you're just trying to sell more guns and this kind of thing. Look at some of the research. Look at Stossel's thing on gun crime. There's a clear correlation. With guns, if trained citizens are allowed to carry concealed weapons, the gun crime will drop. There's clear evidence. If it's harder to get concealed carry weapons, gun crime, violent gun crime, it rises. It's so obvious. Why? Because if you live in a society where everybody has no arms and you're a criminal, you can buy it off the black market, I can bully all of you. Because I know you won't shoot me. But if all of you, and including grandma, had a weapon, then I'm not going to shoot you. Because I'm probably going to get shot by you all. You see what I mean? So it's obvious. This is so easy to understand if you're actually realistic. But of course, there's a group in society always wants, guns are the problem, they're evil. I saw this wonderful sticker on a car in Las Vegas. It said, saying that guns cause killing is like saying that the cause of Rosie O'Donnell's obesity is her fork. Did you get that? Right? It's like saying somebody who's fat, oh, the fork is the problem. The fork, right? That's like actually what you're saying. If you're saying that the problem is the gun. The gun doesn't jump off and shoot you. Right? It's actually an inanimate object. And there's that whole thing with, oh, but there'll be accidents. If you have weapons allowed, there'll be accidents. Do you drive a car? Do you know that your car is a weapon? If you've studied defensive driving or security driving, the first thing you learn is that the car you are driving is a weapon. That is the first thing you learn. So if I'm trailing True Father's car and he's driving and somebody is attacking True Father's car, with my car, I will hit that other car. Do you see? I will use my car as a weapon to hit that car. You see how then the car becomes a weapon? You can see, right? Yeah. Are there accidents with cars? Sure. Do young kids get into accidents? Yes. Do we prevent them from driving because it's a weapon? No, you educate them thoroughly. Right? Can you reduce all the accidents? No. You always have some accidents when you're dealing with millions and millions of people. But through proper training and yes, of course you will minimize accidents. You see, so I realized even myself, I had this huge fear. I've been like brainwashed by the liberal media, and also I went to super liberal schools, so I realized, wow. But when we were young, True Family, we were always training guns. We were training, our brothers all did gun training. They all did all this kind of thing. And somehow, when I was going to school, and I'm thinking, oh, wow, it's kind of crazy. We're a religion, we're out here shooting, we're guns, and all this, right? And probably some of you members like, man, those True kids are crazy. They all love those guns. But then when I went to the liberal institutions, they frown upon it. Guns are the problem. All this, the left position. And of course, the media, you hear that all the time. You hear it all the time. You're inculcated. We're inculcated. We've been told that information by Archangel. It's not actually true. And the Supreme Court, of course, has concluded that the Second Amendment is the right of Americans. So I didn't even know this. 70% of Americans own guns. I didn't even know that. 70%. Can you believe that? Yeah. I think very, very different. Yeah. Yeah, I know, I understand. But anyway, but I'm giving this as some kind of evidence, and I'm not saying I'm expert in it, but do you understand how important it is that as a church we have this, we never actually could even talk about these issues? Do you see? Any of these political issues, we were either left or right. We could actually never principally look at them. Now, when you say, in a principal perspective, if you allow people to have freedom to protect themselves, if that's a freedom, and they're able to do that, then what is the result of that in society? And then you look at the evidence, and you can see that it prevents bullies from attacking. For example, when you look at some of the shootings in high schools, like you heard about in America, like the Columbine shooting and the shootings in high schools, all of those shootings are done, the majority of the shootings, Stossel has the exact information, but are done in what is known as safe zones, where people cannot, even police officers cannot carry protective arms. Yeah, in America. And so in that situation, then you have those kids who brought their weapons to those, quote, safe zones and massacred all these people.
Let's say, for example, we look at the Arab world. Let's look at this example. If we look at the Arab world, we see the Arab Spring. Let's say one Arab nation says to its people, it says, you know what? The government is not going to take all the weapons from you. We're going to actually give you weapons. You have to train, you have to get the license, but we're all going to give the Arabian, let's say if it's Egypt, we're going to give Egyptian people weapons. If we become corrupt, you should fight us. Let's say that's one scenario. Let's say there's another scenario where they say, no, weapons are dangerous. You could shoot your child, or, yeah, or, yeah. But let me finish this example. So let's say another example where government would say, weapons are dangerous. They're different from cars, and you can shoot each other. And if you get angry, you may shoot somebody. So you have to let us take care of the weapons. We have trained police officers. We have trained militia, army. So let us control the weapons, and the process of getting a weapon is very difficult. Let's say. Compare those two possibilities. Which government is actually admitting that maybe it could become evil? And if we do become evil, you as a citizen should fight us. Or give us all your defense. We'll control that. You see how that's a different picture? There is no check and balance on that. Which is the reason, even in Japan, is you have constantly an imperial culture. Always you've had an imperialized culture. And because Japan has leaned so far to the left with the social policies, look how it's falling in economic collapse. Okay, so the question is, of course, with this issue, the question is, it's about freedom. Will people, when they're free, even free to defend themselves, is it actually a check on the government? The American founders believed that. That's why they put it in. Thomas Jefferson said every 30 years there should be a revolt against the government to remind government that people can stand up and fight it. But imagine if the Arab world, right now, one country said, okay, we're going to trust the citizens, you guys check and balance us, we're not going to control all the defense, you guys also have self-defense. If we become evil, you can fight us. That's a really different position than what we've seen in the Arab world and what we've seen with dictatorships all throughout history. Imperial cultures, dictatorships, what do? Constantly always monopolize defense. Always. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, I know. But you have to listen to what you said. I don't want to justify. I don't want to justify. Did you hear what you said? You don't want to justify. But how then do you explain true father creating a Vulcan cannon? How do you explain? Oh, no, but listen. Oh, no, but how about this? How do you explain peace police and peace militia, peace army? How do you explain that? You see, this is what he's addressing with this issue. With this issue, he's looking towards the Swiss system. So there's some people in Switzerland, you know what happens. When you're in the Swiss system, you are in a police, you have to have military training. So you have military training, and then you have, in Swiss it's different. After military training, you're basically a police officer after. I mean, I don't know if you're legally a police officer, but what happens is you can actually bring that, you have the right to bring that weapon that you train with back to your home. So what happens is the Swiss army, the Swiss militia, is not like a full-time militia. So I don't think the women are forced to go, but the men all basically have to go, but they get to bring their weapons back to their home. So what happens? You have an army that's ready at all times. Did you know that Hitler, when he was conquering all of Europe, what was the one country he did not touch? Oh, isn't that interesting? Wasn't Hitler a bully? Well, why didn't he touch Switzerland? He knew if he goes in there, every house becomes a little army. You see, this is what we're talking about. You see what I mean? This is actually a real world scenario. And also, in the early days in America, the police force was not huge. They didn't have a big police force. 90% of the police force was done half-time job. So normal citizens, there's like one sheriff, which was a government employee, one sheriff, but then the other policemen were people who were volunteering. And they would, of course, train and learn the law and you know, it's like this. But it was like a volunteer. It was like a police, but they were not actually policemen full-time. But do you see how, for example, in the Swiss military, when you come out, the Swiss country can become an army in basically a couple hours. Whereas in Korea, if you have China attack here, or if you have North Korea attack here, what do you have to do? The men are trained in the army, but each house doesn't have those defense mechanisms. So what happens? They have to go to a centralized government storage area where all those things are ready. They have to get their weapons, they have to go back, and then they can fight, right? So what happens? By that time, North Korea has shot, or whatever, the country can be quickly invaded in that time. You see, but in the situation where everybody is actually a police officer. Let's say you're a police officer. You're also an army woman. You know how to defend yourself. Everybody, let's say there's a nation, everybody here knows how to defend themselves. And I'm a different nation, I want to conquer you. And remember, we have to remember, in this world, there are tyrants and there are evil nations. That's simply reality. That, I think, we all accept. I think unification members are at least that realistic. We're not that idealistic. Yeah. So in that situation, let's say you're a nation and you can all defend yourself. I have a much harder time conquering you. But let's say you're in Korea now, where this is the issue that Kook Jung is talking to with the government, is that the Korean defense is so weak and can easily be overpowered. Like there's a rating of how strong each army is in this region. And like North Korea is number 5, China, of course, is number 1. There's some other big ones. But South Korea is nowhere near that level. So if any of those realities hit and the South was attacked, it's rich, it has lots of money. People in other countries are starving, they're poor, but they have big armies. This one is rich, it has a very weak army. You have a very unequal situation that can possibly happen. And what if that happens? Millions die. You see, so it's not about an emotional reaction. You have to actually use your intellect. It's not no, I've always been told weapons are bad, or I've always been told defense is bad. No, it's not an emotion. You got to watch out for the emotional reaction. You actually have to think with the intellect. You have to analyze with the intellect. And that's why this is hard, but this is why, but see, this is the first time in our movement where we can actually look at these issues through the lens of principle. This is why I find it so exciting, sister. You see what I mean? I find it so exciting because for the first time we can actually look with reality with our teaching, and how would that work in reality? How would that work with free market economics? How would that work with geopolitical situations, which include defense? Right? How would that work with social issues? We were silent on all these issues. We did not have a clear response. This is why I find this is the most exciting, finally a comprehensive, realistic vision. I honestly was not I could not buy that just doing the ceremonies and the peace award ceremonies and the dialogue. Actually, at Harvard, when I was at Harvard, my teacher at the Center of Studying World Religions, he was my advisor. He criticized, he said, basically Harvard also does interreligious dialogue. Because somewhat similar to us, they also do interreligious dialogue. But he criticized, he said basically, I feel like really stressed because we say it's interreligious dialogue, but basically we get people of the religions who are leaning left. And we just get them into a room. So basically they have the same political policy, beliefs. And then we say this is interreligious dialogue, when actually everybody believes the same thing. And he was criticizing the interreligious dialogue for that. He was saying, you have to include conservatives who have the totally opposite view. If you want to actually have dialogue and learn something, you have to include the fundamentalist Christian and the fundamentalist Muslim. You have to include them. Otherwise, you're not actually having a dialogue. See? And this also, myself, I found in our movement, this is actually the same reality. I said, I've seen that in our movement too. You see, so one of the even criticisms within Harvard that I found with more critically thinking professors, they said if you really want to increase dialogue, you have to act and learning between the different religions. You actually have to study not only what the religions have in similarity, but you actually have to learn the differences. You have to learn the differences, and you have to accept. You have to accept those. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Oh. Yes, no, this is great. Did you hear what she said? This is really important, very important. She said, this is like, maybe this is like man's perspective, but as a woman, like I want to be, I dream about peace, and also as a woman, maybe this is too like a man's perspective. But what did Father say about the peace police and the peace military? Did he say that the men have to do it only? He said the women have to do it. The women are supposed to be leading the peace militia and the peace police. Whoa, wow. And he also said that women have to learn MMA. Wow. See, then you're talking about a different type of woman. Because then now you're talking about, the question is then, what is it? It's not a thing that, see, it's not about, is it what I imagine? I hope most of you understand that the whole point of this was I was saying that I imagined Father in the way I wanted him to appeal to me. But what I realized living with him for a year and a half is that that's not true. I was actually wrong about Father. And I in my mind, psychologically, made myself believe that he was, more leaning left. When actually, in my encounter, it's been told the opposite. That doesn't mean he's like flaming Republican. What I'm saying is it's not left or right, it's headwind. We're talking about the ability to protect people's freedom. This is the central point. Freedom fighters, what does that mean? We protect people's freedom. If we have national power, we don't just enforce unification church. We believe that people were given God-given right to have free will. Of course, responsibility comes with that. I hope I say that enough, but free will. And we are constantly wooed by Archangel to believe that we should not trust. I met many people who said, I don't trust people. Oh my God, there's so many evil people, bad people. I don't trust. there should be no freedom. No, government has to, I met this a lot too. Why don't you, I'm not saying you, but see, that's the same position as Democrat, Republican at this point. Not to trust citizen, trust government. If that's the social structure that is in the, quote, satanic world that we call, then obviously God's culture would be different. It would be opposite, which is you trust human beings. You trust Adam and Eve. You let Adam and Eve own everything. Not government doesn't own. If government owns everything, that's social, communist countries have that, right? Government owns everything, citizens owns nothing. But you have in true free societies where Adam and Eve inherit everything. Adam and Eve own, not 100% obviously, about 90 to 95% realistically, right? Adam and Eve. But then people say, oh, there will be no national parks. Or then people will, just kill all the tigers if they have private property, right? But actually, is that the case? Do people, if you own your big property, do you take away all the nature in your big property? No, a lot of private citizens keep that beautiful nature, see it as an advancement to their property. Okay, so anyways, many of the, we can go on, see how interesting this discussion is. You see, when did we have this kind of discussion in the Unification Church? You see how incredible? This is the first time where I believe, first time at least in my view, where we're actually hearing an alternative to what I've heard in the social world, social media. I'm actually hearing an alternative. And it's rooted in principle. It's fundamentally rooted in God giving human beings freedom to choose. That is amazing. So how does the Unification Church, how do we bring world peace? Yes. Oh. Yeah. Yes. Do you work for Women's Federation? Okay, I'm sorry. But did you know? By men. And men always fighting. I know. I know. But did you ever fight with another woman? You never fight with other women? Never. No, see, but I think this is important because what you said is that Women's Federation is, when Father started, he said that, a man's world is always fighting. And then women's world is like mother and want to create the peace, right? And that's, I believe that, mothers have that heart, absolutely. What I know about true mother is she's a fighter. What I know about true mother, I'm her son. Mother is no pushover. And very interesting, what I know about mother, I actually thought like you. Because I thought, now Father making me train hard, do MMA, training. I thought mother is going to be the first one to say, oh my God, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? You're going to get hurt, Mother I was so shocked. Mother was the most excited. You see? I think that's unfair because you say masculine is good. Yeah, but that's not fair because mother also encouraged her daughters to learn how to defend themselves. Do you know the Injinim is a black belt in Kyokushinkai karate? You know Injinim? Did you know? Did you know she has a black belt in full contact karate? Yeah, martial art. Yeah. Yeah, but we have to see. I want you to see. But you have to. You don't have to get this done today, okay? But I just want you have to be open enough to say maybe I can change my mind. I think is important. Yeah, that's very important because instead of just saying, oh, all weapons are bad, but police have to carry weapons, and if you want to protect somebody, you have to carry weapons. If North Korea or other countries are attacking, you have to have weapons to fight. So I know there's an emotional feeling, as maybe as you as a particular woman who, in your situation, maybe you have emotional, like a feeling when you think about that. Because, guns are somewhat scary and weapons scary. Katana blades, this samurai blade is scary. They can cut off people's heads and, flying, all sorts of crazy stuff. So it seems scary. But what I want to ask of you is, let's first of all keep open mind, and number two, you have to watch your emotion, watch the emotion, and try to assess like intellectually. Okay? And I think many things we've done that through today. I think we've done that intellectually. I think we've went through many intellectual reasons why. Not only, I know maybe you have emotional feeling on weapons as one issue. Many people do. Okay? That's not what I'm focusing on. Focusing on the freedom. See, whether or not if you were the government, if you were the president of the country, would you take away everybody's weapons? Would you be that kind of leader? Or would you actually give people weapons and say, if I become evil, you come challenge me? You see, that's different. Very different. Very different leadership. So I know we want to say, man's problem, but, men are 50% of the world, and many times men are in positions of leadership. So we can't fully ignore men, right? So that's not the best way, I think. So we have to understand that's one reality in our world. Always there is this, there's bullies, bad people, and they build up weapons and they want to conquer people who don't have that ability, right? And they make their power stronger. That's reality, right? That's not, I hope it cannot exist that way in the spirit world or whatever, in the ideal world. Obviously, we hope that. We hope, but not in reality, right? Not in reality. If you think, and I think we have to watch our emotions, because the emotions can cloud what actually we have to think about. Okay, emotions are good. They have very powerful elements, but also we have to watch our emotions, right? So whenever you train anything, you learn. You have to watch your emotions. If you work in office, then you have to watch your emotions sometime. So not only in martial arts or stuff, you have to be aware of emotion. So same thing, when we discussing one leader becomes president, and if you're a president, you take away everybody's defense, and you control that. That's one type of leader. Or do you trust your citizens and you give them strength, and you say, I won't control everything. You can check me. You can check us if we're bad. You can have that balance on us. That's really different. And in a world where you have most leaders and of nations, they always lean the opposite. They always want to control everything and not let the freedom, people have that freedom. They're the one that you feel emotional about. But we have to question that. Is that actually protecting themselves, or is it protecting the citizens? You have to actually look without emotion. I know maybe you never trained in martial arts or never trained with guns and stuff, so a little scary, so maybe you have some conception about, those things, and, some kind of hesitation, but, and so I can understand where that's coming from. But in a situation where in a world where we do exist, with the constant threat of people trying to use power to hurt other people, then obviously you need to have the way to defend yourself. So this is why Father is saying peace, police, peace army has to be led by the women, because the women, because we were tempted by, both Adam and Eve tempted by Archangel, then we come to believe that, maybe a better way is to just allow Archangel to control that department, and we don't touch. But I think his point is, Kuk Jeong's point actually is a very important point. He says, if you give somebody your samurai sword, or you give, if some government want to take your weapons, then that doesn't actually get rid of weapons. It just moves the weapons from you to the government. You're not actually getting rid of weapons. All you're doing is just giving that to them. But I want to constantly bring you back to the two types of leaders. If you had a leader, one that would say, okay, you citizens, I don't think you could shoot each other. You just give me all your means of defense, and just trust me. Or say, no, citizens, I trust you. You can be trained. We'll have one-year training programs, and all of you can become basically policemen. You can understand the law, and you can defend your rights. And if the government becomes evil, then you should fight it. Whoa, that's a totally different type of leader that is actually valuing freedom over control. Now, this is very important for us because as a Unification Church, then how would Chaneguk look like, and how would it actually create world peace? And this sounds really crazy, really radical. I know, see, because what you're hearing today is so different, right? Than what you've normally heard. This is why I was saying I'm so excited in this in a new way, because it's actually it's such a different interpretation of the principle in real world. Whereas we didn't have that. We just simply leaned towards how the social norms were. So, for example, working with religions, and most religions say, no, we have to practice turning the other cheek, and we have to practice disarmament. Like I know, for example, Dalai Lama advocates disarmament of nations. But actually, do I believe that? I think that's actually not possible. If you promote disarmament, who's going to listen to that? The good nations, right? Democratic nations maybe will do it. But will the dictatorships, will they listen to you with the disarmament? Are they going to listen to you? Are they going to keep their promise? No. So what happened? You have actually the able nations, which are democratic, they become disarmed. And then what happened? You have the Cain countries that don't listen to you, and they have more weapons, and they have more means to eat you, conquer countries. What will happen? You see, this is why Father's able UN is different from Cain UN. Because Cain UN promotes, as you may have experienced, promotes strong disarmament and strong this kind of thing. It also promotes in gay marriage or different types of families. The UN has Family Day, and they teach different types of families. Of course, we know this is directly contradicting the Four Pacific Foundation, right? So what able UN, how is that any different? Is it just a copycat of Cain UN, or is it actually totally different? Is it saying able nations must be strong? Good democratic nations, good people must be strong. Because if bad Cain people come and they want to make a lot of killing, it's the able realm that has to stand up and fight. And if you look at Wali Wombon, you see clearly Father said, he actually talks about the Jesus ethic. Jesus talks about sowing, if your enemy strike you, you give him your other cheek, right? You know. And maybe as a woman, you feel that's good. But do you know then you are actually against Father's teaching? Because what Father says, that's not important as a unificationist? Very important. Father says in Wali Wombon, the time of Jesus where he was teaching strike. When you get struck, you turn the other cheek. That was the time where God was sowing the seeds of love. But when the Lord of the second returns, he will harvest the fruit. And so the ethic of turning the other cheek does not apply when the Lord of the second advent returns. And Father writes, he wrote it with his own hand. You know, Wali Wambon is the actual writing of Father with his own hand. He says, when the Cain realm strikes you, you have to strike back and bring them into the dominion of God. Through, you know, maybe we can have dialogue with Hitler, right? If in America, let's say, then America did not go fight, you would have a different world, and you would not have the foundation for the Messiah to begin his ministry. No, you're not taking time. I think this is very good. Let's give her a round of applause, everybody, because I think this is very good. But do you see what I mean? You see, Father is different. And my whole point is, Father is radically different from what we think or what we want him to be. He's radically different. And this, over the last 1.5 years of my life with Father, I have come to realize. I also realized that I unknowingly had many, quote, liberal views. And I realized, man, maybe I was like brainwashed in the academy. I didn't even know it. Maybe I wasn't even critical of the fact that this is just what the media says, everybody says, it seems to be cool, whatever. But actually, when I was with Father for 1.5, no, he's opposite. And that makes sense, because did you know that throughout history, the religions, and it's not because they're inherently evil, but religions have supported dictatorships. The major ones have supported dictatorships, monarchies, and socialism. For example, of course, we know that Catholicism was, in the Middle Ages, very supportive of monarchies. We know Islam had its own sultanates, so it had its own kingly class, okay? We know that even Buddhism supported King Ashoka to spread the teachings of Buddhism. We know, of course, in Hinduism, the many kings that were of those different Indian religions, Vaishnavite or Shivite, etc. We know even in modern reality, the Protestant tradition in America was one of the strongest proponents of, I can start before that. Martin Luther wanted to give the right of marriage, take it away from the church, and give it to the state. And this is why you have the current issue with the same-sex issue. This is all a state issue. The marriage is actually not a realm of the state, it's a realm of the church. The church decides who can get married or not. It's not the state that they can decide that. So, but the unfortunate, unintended consequence of the Protestant Reformation is that they took the marriage and gave it to the secular government state. And then you have the modern Protestant movement in America that supported the social welfare state in America. Was enormously supportive, saying that, calling it the social gospel, saying that it was like Christ. So they clothed it in a type of religiosity that would refer to biblical quotes, but basically pushing a type of socialism. And this is what like Reinhold Niebuhr and Christian realists were opposed to. Because, and also many of the Protestant churches that were supporting these things, they were, and many black churches were supporting this. It was opposite of what the early freedom fighters for blacks in America were saying. Like Frederick Douglass, one of the early intellectuals who was a slave and then became a free man and was fighting for freedom for his African American peoples. One of his core teachings was that you should take nothing from the government, because then you will have a slavery of a different sort. So you should not even take 1 cent from the government. You should have your own brain, you should have your own mind, you should be studied, we can learn how to read, we can learn how to do all things, we can make our own way And we don't need to take it from the government, otherwise we will be slaves of another sort. So actually the original African American freedom fighters were against this. But then you have the modern movements that actually supported this. So what we see is religion has always leaned into supporting actually archangel type institutions. And why is that? It's very simple. From principle perspective, we know. Because Jesus died on the cross. The Lord was killed. By, number one, who was the group that killed the Lord? Two groups. What was the main groups? The first group that killed Jesus was who? The religious people, number one. The second group that killed Jesus was who? The Roman government. The government and the religious people killed Jesus. So because of that, then obviously those institutions cannot provide the kingdom of heaven, because they actually killed the Lord who was going to create the kingdom of heaven. Isn't that interesting? And so what happens is that you see religions that manifest without the living Christ, because he dies on the cross. Then they actually support monarchies and dictatorships and things like this. Instead of bringing to the world the free and ideal world, the kingdom of God. They don't bring that. Isn't it interesting that Father says very clearly, he says, what is the way to peace? I have this quote. I can't remember exactly what volume it's from. He says, what is the way to peace? If I asked our members this, most members actually don't. They'll say different things like family is the key to peace, or this or that is key to peace, or dialogue, whatever. Father says this: the key to peace is freedom. Isn't it interesting? In Family Pledge number 4, 자유와 평화와 통일과 행복. Freedom, I vow to create the world of freedom. 자유와 평화, peace, unification, and happiness. Now, freedom, number one, of course, number comes first. But if you don't have freedom, obviously, then you don't have the first, you don't have freedom. If you don't have freedom, you don't have freedom. If you don't have freedom, can you actually have peace? Can people choose to create peace, the peaceful world? Can you have unity? I mean, if all of Korea, if obviously we see Korea is not united. So without freedom, really, you're not going to have unity, because half of the country is not actually free. And can you actually have happiness if you don't have freedom? No. You have to freely be free to have happiness. See, so actually, if you understand in the principle, it is amazing that we did not grasp this. But the principle is fundamentally showing us a God not only of love, but a God who chooses to suffer and be tortured. He chooses to suffer rather than take away the human being's freedom. All of providential history, God could have just decided, I'm going to take away their freedom. They're screwing it all up. They're messing it all up. And I don't trust them anymore. You're going to be robots from now on. God fought for your freedom. God fought through providential history to preserve human beings' free will. My God, did you ever see principle in that light? But if you actually think about it, it is true. He chose to suffer, then take away our free will, because he knows then we would never be able to freely choose to love him. You see, I think this is why it's challenging for us, and it was for me at first, because we've been so pressured into trying to please society. And so in so doing, we haven't actually offered a radically new understanding of how a world should be. And we haven't done it for 30 years. That's why we actually could not create the kingdom. But for the first time in my life, seriously, in my life, first time, I'm honest about it, even when I was in ministry, I didn't feel it because, not like this, because I still could not answer the social and political and economic issues. But for the first time in my life, I actually feel completely excited about the Unification Church because up till now we've interpreted Father's words through the lens of Archangel. Responsible true children have not come into leadership and interpreted true Father's spirit and heart and his reality, his strong reality. And so we've heard from the people who are supposed to be raising the true children, which are in the position of Archangel. So of course their interpretation is more socialist way, leaning left a little bit. But that's why I think it's different. That's why the 4% foundation needs to be fulfilled. The true children have to become responsible. They have to live for more than themselves, live for the glory of true parents. When that happens, when that 4% foundation happens, and those relationships are working, and they're moving, and that it's rotating, God can be present. He can inspire a totally new vision for the world. A vision where we don't create tyranny. A vision where the Unification Church protects freedom for all the generations to come. I tell you, there is no religion that is teaching this. Zero. I am a scholar of religion, and there is not one religion, not one, that has at its core, if we understand it, the value of freedom. And has that, see, there's not one. But I'm talking to normal people, and when I explain my faith, I'm saying we're different from actually other religions. We're not idealistic. We are practical with our way to peace. And we are freedom fighters. We fight for freedom. We fight for responsibility. We fight for family and faith because that's important in a free society. Because why? There's no social welfare. Let's say there's no social welfare, just dropping money. Who's going to provide social welfare? We talked about it. Two institutions, family and the church, the family and faith. Those are the institutions that provide the social welfare. So in a free society, there's always help. There's always that social welfare, but it's not coming from a government official who doesn't know you and is just dropping money on you and not teaching you values. It's coming from family members who know you, who are saying, you were an idiot and you better apologize to mom, or whatever. And then or you gotta fix this behavior. You're not gonna get my help if you keep on abusing your wife like that, right? But you get that, you're getting the social welfare from the family, and they're changing you. And also the church would do the same thing. The church would also instill within you the values of God. It's a value-centered social welfare process, whereas opposed it's opposite. If the archangel does it, you behave how you want. You destroy your families, no problem, I'll pay for you. And we destroy the country. Freedom is lost, and a dictator can come. You see, so this is why I finally realized why Father comes as a religious leader. Why? Because see how we're even with these issues, very difficult, and you actually have to think very clearly. Very hard to think clearly about these issues because, of course, many of us have been told opposite thing from media, opposite thing from society, opposite thing from teachers that we've had. And so we have this block. But what's the difference between an educational institute and religion? Educational institute changes their education, based on current theory. So if this theory is good, then a lot of education leans that way. If this theory is good, a lot of education leans that way. But religion, you have what? You have the scripture. You have God's word. You have the teaching, the revelation, which cannot change. And religion can teach very difficult concepts with very simple stories. And they can do it not one generation, but eternally. They can do it every single generation. Now, if our church teaching and we're interpreting Father's words socialistically, then what we will create is eternal revolutions of socialism. Whereas when we interpret True Father as the true founder of freedom for the world, then we will teach every generation that it is our responsibility to protect the Adam and Eve's freedom and to have the responsibility not give to Archangel. Keep the responsibility. We have that. That is our gift from God. When did we even reflect on this? In the last 30 years. This is what I'm saying. I'm saying, when did we even reflect on these things critically in the last 30 years? When did we have the ability to use principle to look at social, political, economic situations? We didn't. It's like teaching at a university and you don't have the social sciences. All you have is chemistry and theology. You don't have the social sciences, you don't have sociology, you don't have political science, and you don't have economics. Where in the principle, it teaches that the kingdom of heaven must have religion, politics, and economics. They have to exist. We didn't have any of explanation for these two big parts. We only had one explanation for religion, but not for these huge parts, which even the principle says needs to exist in the kingdom of heaven. Finally, we have a way to understand this from a principal perspective, the social and political dimension. My God, as a unificationist, I am excited. Woo. So, obviously, these issues we have to study more because at first, you may hear it, you say, oh, that's inspiring, but then you go home and say, and then you watch the news and say, oh, maybe, like this. So we actually have to look at evidence. We actually have to keep doing the study. And so that's what actually the insight Kuk Jung has discovered within principle through his unique experiences that God gave him. And it's interesting because Father prophesies with him because his name is Hyung Jin, and the Kuk is Nara Kuk. It means nation. It's amazing that actually he's, with the principle, he's using that, his life experience to interpret a nation, which is actually his name. It's very, very prophetic. Father prophesies this actually. So that's why I don't pretend that it's like my discovery. I give credit to him because it is actually his unique discovery, which I feel finally completes the powerful theology we have, but now gives us a social and political economic vision that builds nations not of tyranny, not of dictatorship, not of an elite group that has all the control and the citizens are impoverished. I don't want to build that kind of country. Maybe some people in the Unification Church wanted to build that kind of country. I don't. I don't want to live in that kind of country. Unification Church, we should be able to build countries where we would be happy to live as citizens, not as kings. And that is why there's only one King of Kings, the true parents of heaven and earth. Only one king. And that king reveals to us God's gift to humanity. Free will, responsibility. He gave us freedom. We have to protect it. We can't let tyrants take it away. We can't let anybody take that responsibility and freedom away. If we do that, we can protect nations from falling into tyranny. Seriously. You have to think about the implications of this. We can protect generations from falling into the hands of tyrants, which is the pattern of history. And which movement, which religion is doing that? Only one. It's the Unification Church. Now, for me, That is inspiring. That can get me out of bed. That can give me hope. Say, my God, yes, I want to build Chunnigo because I know it's not going to be just true family oppressing the whole world. I don't want to live in that. Or whatever elite group. It's where we understand that freedom is the gift of God given to Adam and Eve and true parents. Father was writing in Wonli Wumban, 1951. My God, he was writing in Wonli Wumban about the free and ideal world. My God. He was writing about the free in 1951. He truly is the parent of the free world. The free, he was dreaming this 1951. The whole world could experience the freedom. Not just freedom to do what you want and harm people and hurt people, because that will get you bad consequences. The freedom and the responsibility that comes with that. Because it's with freedom that we can actually search for God. If you look at the countries that take away the citizens' freedom, they control everything. The archangel controls everything. Do they let you believe in a religion? No. Right? That's why Father fought communism. They don't actually let you even believe in a religion. They don't let you seek after God. Because why? They've become God, just like Archangel became God in that relationship. Right? You see how important freedom is in the principle. I'm hitting my head on the ground saying, oh, God, why didn't we see this? Why did we not see it? It's somewhat saddening that we didn't, but my God, when I hear it now, when I feel it now, I feel, yes, we can, just like all you first gen, when you joined, you believe the world could change in 7 years. The kingdom of it could be built in 7 years. Honestly speaking, the way I heard Father's words being interpreted for social policy and economic policy, it's like socialism. I mean, I do not see the kingdom of heaven being built in 7 years with that model. It doesn't work. It didn't happen in the last 50 years. And when Marx's theory dominated the world for 2/3 of the world. That certainly is not the kingdom of heaven. If you've been to communist states, you know that's not the kingdom of heaven. But then the opposite of that, right? The opposite of that, where the archangel doesn't own everything. Adam and Eve own the majority. They're the owners. They're the ones who have freedom. They have also responsibility within that system. It's the difference between food is love. Oh, Father's talking about a socialist state. Or he's talking about philanthropy, personal responsibility to do good deeds because God is inspiring you to help others. That's philanthropy. That's not socialism. You see how huge difference that is? So, for me, I am so excited about this because finally I can see a social and political vision that can change the world in 7 years, and God's speed, we can bring the kingdom of heaven before True Father is 100 years old. The free and ideal world, not dictatorships, not tyrannies, not monarchies, the free and ideal world. And we can show that true parents' teaching revealed to the world that God has protected our freedom and that we also must protect the freedom of our children and our grandchildren. That it is in the Spirit of God to trust one another, to believe in family, believe in faith, to believe that we can change the world. I believe it. Praise God. Thank you, everybody, for this time. I'm ready to change the world.
감사합니다. 장장 3시간 반. 네, 열정적으로.
기도.